Okay, a little late here. I sent out notifications half an hour ago. It is 1/19/2024, Infinite Plane Saturnday. 119 days since Trump's ear was pierced by an AR-15. I assume it'll take a few moments for people to roll in here, so we'll just go ahead and take it slow, just kind of go over a list of things I want to talk about. And I've been posting on my WordPress the points of interest. So for today, let me go ahead and refresh that. Today's 119 days after Trump was shot. There are anti-Trump protests in New York, and there's an anti-Trump protest gathering around the Space Needle in Seattle. 43 research monkeys still loose in South Carolina. Elon Musk announces a new world order. Pretty blatant. We'll talk about that. The Atlantic features more predictive programming for a Trump head wound. They're so blatant, The Atlantic, which is owned by George Soros' son, which makes it very easy for the alt media to say that the foreshadowing is a plot by George Soros, which is the line that Laura Loomer has used. Left promotes election denialism now. There are people talking about the election having been stolen, millions of missing voters. It's not getting a lot of traction, but there is a lot of resentment. And the resentment suggests that, like JL said, he said Kamala would lose, but it would be disputed, and it would end up in some disaster. And the Civil War movie, we often reference as a predictive programming basis for what's to come, has Trump, his character, in the White House, and then he has to be taken out by the other side. Iran had 3 assassins and a failed plot to take out Trump. Nick Fuentes was doxxed on X. He had this rant, which you take it out of context and it's pretty offensive, where he said, your body, our choice. Just sort of this misogynistic incel rant, which he's known for. But one of these clips out of context, and the context is he's a shock jock, pandering to his audience. But it's been picked up by basically everyone. And all kinds of people are now posting his address and his house, and they're saying, your house, my choice. So there seems to be a movement, and there's even a petition up to drive Nick Fuentes out of suburban Chicago. I didn't play his rant. I kind of stopped playing. I follow all these characters who are on the world stage and have significant, platforms when it comes to putting certain messages out there. Remember, he was Kanye West's or Ye's campaign manager and had dinner with Donald Trump. So he's not an insignificant character, and there's a reason why he's amplified and spotlit. And so his little rant has become something of a focal point. So let's see, joined by Roxy, Philip, the Frugal Snowbird, Quays, GeoFior, Truman B3000, Zin Velis, Junders Punkit says happy late birthday, thanks. Joined also by Howard Boyd. Ted Stryker 2012 says, 2112, about time. Yeah, I was, were we even live Election Day? No, we weren't. I had a feeling. I said I was going to take Election Day off, and I wasn't planning on it, but I had to. But I've been working on some side projects, like for specifically publishing. Before I started doing this live streaming as my primary vocation, I was doing a lot of publishing, and the residuals, the royalties, especially from audiobooks, were adding up. And I'm going to go ahead and focus on that for a bit, because I want to make sure that I can keep this thing afloat without any interruptions. And thanks to all of you and your dedication, this think tank continues to move. Barely stalled at any point. Lord Laney says, I typed 33 into the search bar on my MSM newsfeed for cheap laughs now. Yeah, we'll go over that. There's the typical stuff, the programming stuff, the clues that we're looking at staged events. In fact, I have a blog post to go over today that deals with this in particular. Deprogrammed Truther says, feels like home. Agreed. Mango Penguins, thanks for joining. Osher has arrived with a bucket of blue wrenches. So if you are just lurking in the background, you will get a wrench. And that's interesting. I was just thinking about Chalk Body Outline, and he is now a Blue Wrench Lodge member. Alpha Effer, AJ206, Roxy W, and Into the Break have all received the coveted blue wrench. Abuse the power responsibly. And are joined by Reverse History. And speaking of, we're going to be doing Auto Hoax Con number 3, likely on the 30th. I was thinking the 16th because I like the numbers. But anyway, I want to make sure that we get a couple more voices, and I want to give people time to produce what they want to produce, especially if it's going to be a pre-recorded event or podcast. So the 30th is the weekend after Thanksgiving, which makes a lot more sense. So we are going to do it. And also, we have a cinematographer in-house, which makes it all the more likely I'll have some kind of interactions with people locally, audience, and perhaps even someone willing to debate or discuss. Kevin Mooring says, to be honest, chalk body outline is how I found IPS. And that just emphasizes the importance of networking with any content creator on this side of the screen. Anybody who's figured out that the world stage is a mental model that they manufacture for the masses, and that it's just a flawed model at that, but it's just a model. It's not the territory. And when you analyze news with this understanding, you don't fall for the different psyops. And anybody who gets that needs to network. And our combined think tanks, it will create what I consider to be the parallel media. And we are it right now, but it is expanding. And the Auto Hoax conferences and soon-to-be conventions are going to be meant specifically to blow up the parallel media and maintain its purity. Because parallel media is not for truthers. It's not for mainstreamers. It's not for voters. And I understand if you vote. It's just like going to a football game. Like, I don't hold it against anybody. It's entertainment. But what I'm saying is, in principle, we understand the folly of it, the phoniness of it. And you're voting for a crisis actor and a liar. So you have to understand that from our perspective, the conscientious objection of the skeptic is what we want to maintain. We're not involved in any of these different fake struggles, completely contrived. Copaesthetic has brought 5 wrenches. Nicotramus, Jennifer Reeves, IFFA73, Scott Rankin. And by the way, those memberships add up. That's what keeps this thing afloat. Between Patreon, the IPS site, and this, I'm able to do this, for the most part, full time. Occasionally, I fall behind. Last month, I had a lot of distractions. Plus, I had to go not protest, but I had to attempt to interview Magas in their native habitat. And that just took a lot of time and a little bit of money, but it was 100% worth it. And I did so knowing that, it was going to cost a little bit to get not only the quality footage, but to start building our local crew for all future events. Tom Smith says, I joined after the Trump magic show 119 days ago for Tom Smith. So 119 days ago, Donald Trump had his ear clipped by an AR-15, but it miraculously healed. I found a whole group of lefties on Twitter saying it was fake. And they were comparing people who, apparently it happens, a lot of people at barbers get their ears clipped, and it takes a while to heal. But Trump's magically healed. A lot of people are calling it fake. But the people calling it fake themselves don't exist in the right context for that to mean anything. If you think everything else is real in the fake news and you call one thing fake, it's like, okay, you're calling one tree fake in a forest of fakery. It doesn't matter. You have to be able to approach this from a big picture perspective, what I call the off-world stage perspective. So it doesn't matter if people on any end of the spectrum notice something fake, because they will never put that information in the right context. Okay, continuing. Lucid Stream says, this is Algae Rhythms, by the way. Changed my name. Okay, well, thank you. Algae Rhythms is now Lucid Streams. I like that. Great moniker. HLGGLH, 5 more wrenches, plain decoded T-Rex in space, which is a scientific fact. When the asteroid, and I think it was 33 miles wide, when it hit the Earth 66.6 million years ago, it punctured the atmosphere with such force and such speed that it created this super soaker-like effect and squirted ocean and land and biomatter onto the moon. And according to science, there are dinosaur bones on the moon. Presumably, there's got to be a dinosaur belt. Like, eventually, the ISS could, literally get hit by a T-Rex skull. I know this is a fact because I looked into it, and Chief Crow has a song about it called Dinosaurs in Space. Bach Precision, FMGR, Ryler 05 are all now Blue Wrench member holders. Yes, exactly. Salty Siren says 119 days on 11/9. Interesting numerology. I mean, and it's not us cherry picking. We are just looking at the patterns that are there, and we're noticing. Joined by Messianic Charlatan. Oh, nice. Lucid Stream says my shaman friend now says auto hoax when he greets me. It's just applied skepticism. Fake until proven real should be the standard of evidence, and the media should be providing evidence to support their claims. But since they've merged humanity with this fictional universe, the closed system of the mass media worldview, ever since then, you can no longer assume it to be real until proven fake. And even if it is true, even if you have a reporter, some news agency is reporting that the sky is blue, yeah, that's true. But from their worldview, which they are a part of, fake nukes are real. Planet-killing asteroids are real. Every debunked fake news event simulation is real. So they're standing upon an edifice of lies. Doesn't matter if they tell the truth. Just like it doesn't matter if somebody notices something's fake, if their mind is still in the MSM box. The closed system is what it is. The new press passes will be out here soon. I've had to do a full redesign, new phone numbers and everything. I'm sourcing them locally. That's what I mean by taking this time off. I've been catching up on a few things. Oh, I see. Pronounce Houch. You'll have to call in and tell us how your friend pronounces auto hoax. And one more point about this. We could just say skeptics. We could say media skeptics. We could say critics. The trouble with this is that these already exist on the world stage, and they assume the role of critic or skeptic without ever being skeptic of the primary presentation. The mainstream mediation assumes that what's on the screen is real, and they build on that. And we take the subtractive view. And so I can't just call this media skeptics, but I think auto hoax was a pejorative, and these were those who were calling events fake like almost immediately. And the regular influencers in the truther movement said, you can't do that. You have to wait and look for the evidence that it's fake. And I'm like, wait, no, the burden of proof isn't ours. And they're never going to show you evidence of anything being fake. You always have to go outside of their frame of reference to get to the truth. I liken it to a magic show. You can't debunk the magic trick from where you sit watching the magician with his misdirection and his illusions that are designed to fool people directly in front of him. But if you were to go backstage, you would see through it. And so, for the most part, the people who believe the news stories are taking it at face value. And they don't have enough information to know it to be true. It's a lot of what you would consider to be an appeal or an argument from authority. And I reject it. I reject the authority of the when I say MSM, I mean the mainstream world view and its pundits, because they're consistently demonstrated to be using simulations. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit more here in a minute. Yeah, 53 monkeys escaped. No, 43. Or were released. And yes, Lucid Stream says one of the astronauts lost their head. And that's an old clip. That's a great point too. And I'll play the clip of the astronaut. His head goes through the ceiling. Kevin Mooring says press passes are bad during the Civil War movie. So the Civil War movie, it's Trump in office, and then you have the MAGAs who hate the media, and they are the stories told from the perspective of the media. So the media are portrayed as like martyrs. So here you have the media as martyrs who are being traumatized by what they're having to cover because they're covering the Civil War. Meanwhile, the people who don't watch the news don't even know there's a war going on. It's all kind of intriguing because it's like how things really are. But it's the media manufacturing these events, and a lot of people don't even pay attention. But they make the point here that it's the right-wing anti-media that is the enemy. And at the end of the movie, of course, they go in and they take out the Trump character, and they make a black woman soldier do it. So it's all just propaganda. But if you look at the resentment from the left right now over Harris losing, it all makes sense now. And this is their attitude, and I can show you. I've been going through X. A lot of violent and disturbed rhetoric. A lot of Trump derangement syndrome. They just dialed it up to 11. And so, as Kevin Mooring points out, in this movie, which was directed by the guy who wrote 28 Days Later, which has the whole ape rage virus thing. In the movie, the press passes are demonized, and this has been a reoccurring theme. So I think it's interesting that as soon as I was about to go out to this MAGA event, the press pass supplier just canceled my account. Well, they canceled that order, and they said we can no longer provide badges, which is kind of strange. Ted Stryker says, my truck was stolen but recovered. The thieves peeled off my IPS sticker and threw it all away in my glove box, including the press pass, trying to build back to normal. It's probably the FBI. You've been gang stalked. No, I'm sorry to hear that. I had my catalytic converter stolen. Well, they tried. They got my muffler. They left the good stuff behind. And apparently, was it polonium? There's all these different metals that they sell. They didn't get any of it. And then the second time they came back and they attempted to hotwire the vehicle, so now we use a club. The third time, they just took a few things, minor things. They leave the books. Like, you could leave your money in a book, in your car, on your dash, and it's perfectly safe. A mob could go through robbing your car, and they just won't touch it. It's weird. Okay, let's continue. Esteban says, all right, IPS is back. Yeah, I'm going to try not to miss too many more days, but again, I have a lot of things to catch up on. We have had a very busy month. Okay, so let's go through the list. Actually, this is what I want to get into. So here's a point that I often reiterate, and it has to do with the why, because some people say, well, why would they fake it? Or they see the fakery, and they look at it as anomalous or isolated. Like, this little event may have some eerie connection to the news. It's a synchronicity. It's synchromysticism, or man couldn't do it. We have all these different explanations for the glitchiness in the matrix as it's broadcast to us. But I think we have come across the reason for it all. The reason behind all of it. And it comes down to fake news becomes fake history. So I have a term here, which I'll probably add to the lexicon, history telling. So understanding the connection between fake news and fake history is necessary to understand the purpose of predictive programming. Now, predictive programming exists. We study it. We've studied it for years in depth. Not only does it exist, but to say it doesn't exist just betrays ignorance, lack of research, lack of situational awareness, no situational awareness at all. In the likes of Mike Rothschild, who says predictive programming is just a conspiracy theory. It's like, no, we have our receipts, and we provide them all the time. So the connection here is this, in entertainment or entrainment. So 1, fake news is a vague description of what media consumers are seeing. It's better described as simulated news events, propaganda disguised as real news. These are acted out like a reality TV show episode with its directors, actors, and role players. 2, simulated news events are not false flags, and they're not inside jobs. These are old labels that presuppose the events are technically real and that there's a conspiracy behind them. 3, the simulated events are grafted onto the actual events. The merging of fake with real is accomplished with the consent of the media consumers who unwittingly conflate the two. The masses are confused. They're misinformed. 4, all significant simulations are preceded by copious predictive programming, a form of covert propaganda messaging, primarily planted in the entertainment media, but evident throughout seemingly separate media ecosystems. We talk about the predictive programming in the movies quite a bit here, but others, like one of our frequent callers, Jurassic Liars, notices it in the news. You can find it in the video games. It's all over the place. But it's essentially covert propaganda. That is what we're looking at. 5, all the simulated events take place within the mainstream fictional universe. This means that the fakery is internally consistent and self-referential. This is why all the fake events reference one another in the forms of, like, Audrey Hale was inspired by Littleton, or Brenton Tarrant stole his homework from Anders Breivik, just copied his manifesto. How many people have basically stolen the work of Ted Kaczynski? But my point is, these fake events are all talked about in the same context, as though they represent an escalation. But it's a fictional universe, just like Marvel. 6, predictive programming precedes and foreshadows future simulated events and psychological operations. The fact that it only ever precedes simulations and fakery is conclusive evidence that it's a product of the same entity. So, in other words, it's the PSYOP entertainment complex that synchronizes the entertainment and the predictive covert propaganda and future news events. So this means we can rule out the possibility that these foreshadowed events involve actual atrocity and death. We can rule in that these are simulations. But we can also rule out that this involves higher powers, artificial intelligence, demiurges, gods, or directors tapping into the zeitgeist, because this is just an aspect of how media is constructed. And so we're looking at something beyond what the media calls eerie coincidences. And then 7, the internal consistency of the fakery with entertainment reveals the deliberate entrainment of past and future. So it's like a form of prophecy fulfillment by the prophecy writers. They can basically synchronize it in such a way that it looks like it's coincidence. It looks like man couldn't have organized it, but these are synchronized, which makes it look like synchronicity. So this leads to the erroneous conclusions regarding media, where people will ascribe the coincidences to non-human intervention, that non-human entities are involved. And we can abandon that as an explanation. It's non-skeptical. And considering now that we have accumulated a ton of evidence in favor of what I call the PSYOP entertainment complex, it exists. We know who is responsible for predictive programming, and we know the purpose. And the purpose is, 1, to control the present. The power elite has supplanted and replaced religion with media as the dominant worldview monopoly. Quote, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past, which is Orwell from 1984. He's talking about worldview monopoly. And over time, the body of fake news becomes history. Our history is written in advance, and the masses have been conquered by those who write and perform it in the theater of Psywar, which is what we term here the world stage. So the skepticism of the media shouldn't end with just questioning the news, because it's monolithic and includes all the entertainment. It's a closed informational system, and there's no meaningful distinction between what you see on Netflix, Fox, CNN, or social media reportage. It's all storytelling. And this is not hyperbole. This is how it works. And it's a far more satisfactory and logical explanation than any other that have ever been posited yet. And a lot of people are invested in the lie. They're invested in the belief that people are really dying. Like this group did 9/11, or this group is responsible for this or that atrocity. And it's like, no. For example, Lee Harvey Oswald didn't shoot JFK. Stanley Kubrick did. Israel didn't secretly do 9/11, nor did radical Muslims. It was the media. And it's not even that they did it as though they committed the atrocity. It's like, no, they're actually the producers of the simulation. And these simulations are merged into our dominant worldview, and they're treated as real. All right, continuing here. Esteban, thanks for joining. Says, love this cat. Tim is a good egg. Truman B3000 says, illusion warfare. Yeah, illusion warfare is a term by Les Luthor, and that's a great way of putting it. Illusion warfare makes a lot of sense because we're not talking about real destruction and real deaths. And I call it the bloody guardrail. A lot of people stop on their path to figuring out how this works when they see blood or fake blood. Because if you went and checked the blood on the guardrail, it's theatrical blood, Halloween stuff. But there are those who will say, well, Trump did fake it, but the firemen died. It's like, no. Another axiom here. If you see any indicator of hoaxery on any major event, you have to rule in the possibility it's a simulation. And at that point, the burden of proof for any kind of death has to be met. And so the death toll must start at 0. So, for example, you can't assume one person died at the Trump event because there's evidence of fakery we have to start at zero, and we have zero evidence. Never start with the death toll they give you. Start with zero, demand evidence. Because people see the numbers, they see the blood, they see the death toll. I mean, do you remember the story last year about the 40 decapitated babies? And it turns out it was on like the 33rd anniversary of the incubator baby story. Just same psyop. They just recycle these things. There's nothing they don't recycle. Salty Siren says conspiracy has been redefined as lie. It's annoying. It's true. And I hate the way they say conspiracist. And we're looking at the real conspiracy. The real conspiracy isn't reptilians. It's not this new world order is about to show up and take over or anything like that. The conspiracy is the ongoing process of using mass media to keep mankind synchronized in a simulation. The real conspiracy is that the news media is so controlled in the form of worldview monopoly, where they exclude what doesn't matter, they include what they think should. It's so controlled that it's become the dominant paradigm for all mankind, which means that we all believe in the collective myths, you could say, contemporary myths. And of course, if you don't believe, you're castigated, impugned, exiled, censored, or not even acknowledged. Because the big conspiracy channels that we call controlled opposition are acknowledged plenty. They're center stage. Look at all the popular conspiracy theorists who are, quote, censored, who are the face of January 6th. They just get tons of exposure. What doesn't get exposure are those who are calling it all fake. And that's because, of course, we're looking at a staged production. Messianic Charlatan says, without your show on the airwaves, Earth returns immediately to its complete sleepwalk. Yeah, I think so. I think the default is the like the blue pill tranquility. It just settles. If nobody's throwing rocks into the sea of irrelevance and creating ripples. Truman B3000 says, the fact that Keisha's song Die Young was trending before the Sandy hoax and was taken down is very telling. Concurrent programming. Also, the song Pumped Up Kicks was trending before SH. Yeah, those are great examples, and it shows that this is the standard operating procedure. They've always done it this way. They've always had prediction, a body of predictive programming, which is just advertising. It's propaganda. But they've always had the concurrent stuff, and then they've had the media tie-ins. So here you have a musician whose music is probably listened to by people who would be in school. And when her song is changed, now all of these students hear about it. So it becomes a carrier for the PSYOP. Now they all have a closer connection to this shooting. And we see this many times. Lucid Stream says, I disagree with stopping at the PSYOP entertainment complex. There's more to it beyond the material. Abandoning other and more pertinent levels of analysis equates to narrow-mindedness, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm all for it, but I'm of the opinion here that in order to separate the mental simulation of the world stage from the physical world, we have to do so from a position of objectivity. And the instant we get into mysticism, even if it's a legitimate search, it takes us out of the realm of facts that we can hold them accountable to. Like, for example, a lot of Mandela affected people believe that they've seen through the matrix and I'm saying, look, the Mandela effect is cognitive sabotage, because now you're saying, hey, this event was a simulation, but the tags on my underwear changed. It's like, wait a minute here. Either reality is objective or it's not. If reality is not objective, then why would you waste your time trying to hold the news to an objective standard? Because the numbers could change. 9/11 could involve a completely different scenario tomorrow if you believe in the Mandela effect and reality is shifty. So I'm not abandoning other levels of reality, but this is a special area. We are doing an objective, skeptical takedown of the mass media model. That's all we are doing here. I'm open to discussing other stuff. If you all want to study witchcraft or even other obscure things and just talk about these things in depth, I'm all for it. But what I'm trying to maintain is objectivity. So we can talk about, because there is other stuff. We do talk about this. There's obvious indicators that the power elite are some kind of maybe animists. They believe in panpsychism. They practice magic on some levels. there is some kind of element there that you can't deny. And it is true that the space program is a syncretic blend of Mystery Babylon, Thelema, and science fiction. And that Nasatology is the one world order religion. It's already been installed. The space is a construct to replace heaven. So I'm not trying to avoid the transcendent. I'm very fascinated by all of it. If anybody here has experience with synchronicity, probability manipulation, if any of you are psychic, if you can do divination, call in and talk about it. But it's kind of a separate topic from news media analysis itself, because the off-world stage perspective is the only place in the world where you will find objectivity. You will not find it among the objectivists. The objectivists under Ayn Rand immediately plugged their philosophical framework into believing that the mainstream media was real, so they plugged it into that fictional universe. They never were objective. And the synchro mystics got it totally wrong. And I understand in some ways that they want to say, well, maybe there's a higher power that wrote the script. No, that's a dead end. It's a cul-de-sac. Because now it's like saying only gremlins can hack computers because humankind couldn't do it. It's too hard. Well, then the hackers have an alibi. And I don't know if we should give the reality hackers, the high-level programmers, an alibi. But what we have been doing with our objective analysis here is we have 100% been consistently unveiling how this thing works. And this hasn't been done. The misinterpretation of predictive programming is still going on. Truthers haven't figured it out yet. How many years have they had to figure this out? The purpose behind news bending, the control over history and time, it's pretty self-evident now why they do it all and how it is all a closed system. But we have to identify the model and separate the model from the real thing. And from the very beginning of this channel, we were trying to arrive at some model of truth, understanding how media really works and trying to discern what it means that there's so much fakery. And at that time, I realized we have to break away from anybody beginning with a model that they've already established and that they just defend. So that's an important thing to think about here, is that we don't have all the answers, but just because we don't trust the answers they have doesn't mean that we have to just jump onto something else. And so I'm very slow to jump onto, oh, well, it's synchro-mysticism. And a lot of people are stuck on, there's a higher power. There's a demiurge. Or these Hollywood directors are magically tapping into something and then foreshadowing the news. And again, those are explanations that used to satisfy, but they no longer do. But as far as the spiritual, I'm fine with that. I'm just not a very, I think these are separate categories. There is no other think tank dedicated to an objective, skeptical takedown of mass media, and I want to maintain its purity. Otherwise, we end up, and I'm fine with people who are, heavily religious and stuff. I think we can keep these things compartmentalized. One of the primary distinctions between the off-world stage perspective and the on-world stage perspective is to be in the mainstream mediated closed system of information, one must be a believer. A believer is someone who is, on some level, taking their information secondhand when it comes to cosmography or any big news event, if it's coming through a filter. And that's fine. They're believing it because they don't have direct access to know. But there is the third option. If you can't verify their big claims and you can't get evidence to satisfy your non-belief, you can just choose to not believe. So I take the stance of the non-believer, and I want to separate belief from knowledge. Mainstream media believers are, by nature, in need of an authority to tell them what to think. And I'm trying to break that habit or that practice. It's actually a burden of proof issue. So I want to foment a culture of non-belief. And if we get into, well, let's just open up the door to anything, quote, spiritual, it loses the objectivity. I was really quick to point out that the Mandela effect is a cognitive sabotage psyop against truthers. And a lot of those people still hate me to this day. They're mad about me debunking the Mandela effect. And I had others say, well, don't debunk it. This is their spirituality. This gives their life meaning. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but just don't pretend like the Mandela effect is compatible with media skepticism. These are two different things. But a lot of people are mad at me for debunking it, and it has been debunked. And I'm consistently seeing that there are still some people falling for it. But the reason why I want to get rid of it is that if you fall for this, then there are a number of logical fallacies that you're vulnerable to. And that's what we're trying to get rid of, these vulnerabilities to being lied to. The reason why I call out chemtrail believers is that they fall for loaded questions. If you believe in chemtrails, you fall for loaded questions and you find appeals to motive to be valid for making your points. And so these are two habits of thought that need to go. And so the idea of the off-world stage perspective and media skeptics is that we are paying more attention to the methodology of how we acquire information, and we don't just let certain things get a pass because it satisfies some cognitive bias. So for example, Timothy Ryan. I saw this on the Fakeologist the other day. Timothy Ryan was talking about the Mandela effect, and he said that there was a group in the 1970s called Spiral Staircase, and now it's Starcase. Completely different meaning. So he's remembering this group from 40 years ago, and he remembers their name was Spiral Staircase, and now it changed to Stare, Staircase. So this is his evidence, and he said this is one of hundreds of examples of how the reality is shifting because of CERN. So I looked into it. It took me 5 seconds to debunk him. The Spiral Staircase was an American pop band known for their single in 1969, More Today Than Yesterday. They insisted they change their name. They renamed it. They had this other band name, and they changed it to Spiral Staircase after a movie with a, quote, deliberate misspelling. So they spelled their name Staircase on purpose. It was a decision they made as a band. So whoever Timothy Ryan is, he's misremembering, or he just didn't remember it correctly in the first place. But it was never spelled the first way. And I find this is true for many Mandela effects, where they don't actually research it. They just assume these things are real, and they just go with the Mandela effect. And again, I think it's sabotage. Okay, let us continue. Esteban says, the spiritual exists, but not needed to prove the points. True. I think I'm willing to talk about it, but I think it needs to be separate. Like, I would be willing to go on to other channels if people just talk about that. Or if somebody has some special information, I might call in. If you have any kind of info about ritual magic, about paganism, about anything that could add to our sum total of understanding of what we're looking at. Because there is this point where you see magic and media interfacing. If you're a chaos magician or Thelemite, call in. For example, the Super Bowls. Explain what you see with these Super Bowls. I mean, obviously, we're looking at the iconography of what we call the mystery schools. And this is consistent. And the next Super Bowl is going to have Kendrick Lamar. And I can already more or less predict what it's going to have. But I'm interested in talking about these things. We entertained a long conversation with a Bible believer the other day. And it was really thought-provoking. It really had me think about religion. In fact, I started working on an ebook about religion and my thoughts on it. Because I truly haven't given religion much thought in years. Because I look at mainstream media as the dominant world religion, and I've come to interpret the other religions, the previous traditional religions, as just predecessors to what we're living in right now. We're looking at ancient and modern mediators. And what are mediators? Like the priests, the pundits. So we have the masses who are following the program. They have accepted a worldview. You have the priesthood who convey it. But who's behind the priesthood? What's behind the, like when it comes to the mass media, the programmers, when it comes to religion, what's behind the surface, the esoteric? And that's kind of what when we talk about spirituality and the occult, like, well, there's something that is hidden from the masses with both the media and religion. And I found some interesting parallels. But the main thing is the use of the priesthood that have to tell you what's real, or the pundits that have to tell you what's real. And the caller was making a distinction between church and spirituality, which I think is a valid point. But the conversation about religion never really gets too far, as far as I'm concerned, as far as people's individual predilections, because it's not monolithic. I don't think I've ever met two religious people who believe the same way. So I don't really press the issue. I really don't. I don't think it matters. And one thing I consistently notice, though, is that some religionists will automatically say that everybody else's religion is wrong. Oh, all those people did it wrong their whole lives. All those people are... And I'm like, that's fine. You can believe that if you want. But objectively speaking, from the off-world stage perspective, all religionists are on the same level playing field, from my perspective. And I do think traditional religions are simply worldview monopolies. And the mainstream mediation has replaced all of those. And right now we're seeing the culture war. It really manifests between the vision of traditional religion and the modern religion of media. And the modern religion of media in 2020 demonstrated itself as the savior, the injectable Eucharist, and the people who reject the media are the unsaved, the conspiracy theorists. They created this massive schism in society, and it's based on this traditional versus progressive version. You know, traditional, like kind of like a, I guess, idealized past versus the future, which is a utopia. And then I would also argue that every holy book, all the holy books are essentially worldview monopolies. Like if everybody believed in what was in your book that you channeled, well, now everybody is more or less under your control. And this goes for every religion. And so I've been suggesting here for some time that the mainstream media is the default world state church, and your iPhone is your little monolith. This is the Bible. But they're in the process of censoring it. They have to curate it. And they're going to get the public's acquiescence in totally censoring the worldview. That way they can maintain this one world religion where nobody disbelieves in the essential myths. Everybody should believe that we're going to Mars. Everybody needs to believe in nukes. So when they show a mushroom cloud on TV, everybody hits the ground, ducks and covers in fear, genuflecting before the power of the state, which is what you're really doing. If you're scared of nukes, you basically worship Big Brother. It's a war god construct. If you believe in the flood myths, ancient or modern, you're being controlled by big government lies. Yes, that's another point too. I don't believe that like Noah's Ark and the modern National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, I don't think these are separate, same authors. I think the power elite that writes the holy books also write the history. The history, of course, is the perspective of events as told, conveyed from this particular worldview monopoly. Okay, continuing. David Peck says military vaccines are life extenders. Well, anti-vax is a controlled opposition position. I mean, anti-vaxxers are, they lost credibility with me. Sorry. I gave it a chance. I had hoped that there would be a massive pile of dead Democrats and no voters for this election because the vaxxers were right and Bill Gates was here to depopulate us. But that didn't happen. Nobody died. Nobody cried. And then it became this kind of reverse thing where 2020 was all about the pandemic, and then after that it was dominated by the right side of the fence, totally terrified about the pokey. But needle phobia is a psyop. And this is the thing too. The box, it's so clear. The pro and the anti. If you're on any position anti, in my view, you're in the box. Now, if you don't want to participate, you don't have to define yourself by becoming the antagonist, which puts you on their game board. You could just say you're a non. I'm a non fill in the blank. It's okay to not give an F. It's okay to suspend judgment until you have more information. It's okay to not get triggered and feel like you have to advocate and try to save the other side from their own bad decisions. I always ask this of the antis. I'm like asking them, so you believe that the other side's going to kill you and everybody you love. and yet you're trying to stop them from doing it to themselves first. Like, I don't understand. I guess I don't understand 5D chess. Okay, continuing here. Thomas Hughes says, glad to catch a live draft tonight. Yep, this is going to be the normal time. I hate to miss, but it's been an insane week, and I figured everybody would be watching the election, and that whole thing didn't surprise any of us. Okay, let us continue. Someone says hope floats. Oh yeah, hopium springs eternal, and the hopium is a form of cope, but it's also an addiction in a way. It's pretty bad. And hopium is also built on the model itself. Like, what are you really hoping for? A great reset from what? Like, what exactly is the end game here? And both sides have their... Let me show you, this is a good example of both sides, how they're both playing into the same thing. So the New World Order has been introduced by the World Economic Forum. And then they have the nice little 666 built into their logo. And on the right, and this is a meme, the right-winger guy is screaming, no, only evil globalists want that. So, of course, they don't like the World Economic Forum because it's all about the New World Order. Then Elon Musk comes out, and he has a picture of himself with Trump and his own kid, and it's labeled New World Order. And now the same people who are against WEF are all for this. Similar to the Great Awakening and the Great Reset. Those who liked the Great Reset were afraid of the Great Awakening because it was from the other side. And the proponents of a Great Awakening were terrified of a Great Reset. It's like, these are the same thing. Okay, this is an example of predictive programming, again, from The Atlantic. If you remember, The Atlantic had, with specificity, demonstrated that the ear would be shot. So this is a new one. Trump won. Now what? The United States is about to become a different type of country. Now take a look here on the side of his head. What is the first thing you think? Because this is just propaganda imagery. What do you think? What does this call to mind when you look at the side of Trump's head? And keep in mind, this is The Atlantic. So as I'll show you here, The Atlantic has the image of him with his ear clipped. The Atlantic, previous to that, had an ominous reference to the number 47 and a bullet hole, broken glass. So again, this is Trump's ear from The Atlantic. This is before he was shot in the ear. Okay. And then we have this on 9/11, Time magazine, where Trump is coming out of a sand pit, and it says Time, he's in trouble. And this is right before he was shot at, or nearly shot at, by the second shooter. And we have many more examples, but this is The Atlantic. So here I am looking at the latest Atlantic. So in the comments, let's see here. Anybody, what do you think this looks like? It looks to me like his temple has a bloody wound, and it's rivulets of blood just dripping down his head. It looks like a gruesome head wound on the side of his head. So again, this is The Atlantic, just more predictive programming, and then we find out on top of this, as this happens, that there was a plot from Iran to take him out. Okay, let me play a couple clips. Three things. First, let me play a little bit of election denialism coming from the left, stoking the rage.
Let me also point out something more strange, which has been happening at the same time and it hasn't had as much attention. The day before Trump made those remarks on Friday, he said, you're never going to have to vote again after you vote for me this one time. The day before that, on Thursday last week, he didn't say that people wouldn't have to vote anymore.
Okay, what she's talking about is the statement Trump made where he said that you would never have to vote for him anymore. You don't have to vote. He already has the votes. And it's kind of taken out of context in a way, but what the insinuation is that he knew he had foreknowledge he was going to win, that he had somehow rigged it. This is Rachel Maddow. So he was mostly, I would imagine, expressing confidence in his own turnout expectations. But she's taken this to suggest something else, that it's sinister. And this has had results, and now we're seeing protests. And there's a lot of rhetoric like this. It's just more election denialism, but this time from the left. And a lot of people are playing these compilations of people who are going into full Trump derangement syndrome outbursts because of the loss. Entertaining, as always. Okay, let's move on. I can't get her to play. Okay, this is interesting. I've talked about this before. This is an individual who says you can clear chemtrails with vinegar and copper wire.
Skies are a little murky today. First time in a while that's a little... So I've noticed.
Now, this guy not only is going to demonstrate how chemtrails can be cleared with vinegar, but he also does what he calls decrees. So you do some prayer along with it.
That the skies are a little murky today. First time in a while that's a little questionable. So I'm going to go through my practice of decreeing, and also I'm going to...
So decreeing refers to the prayers, and then the chemtrails are going to be distilled, or rather nullified by distilled white vinegar. Now, I don't know if he boils it or if he just shakes it at the sky.
Fill my bowls with vinegar.
Salty says spray and pray. I think he does spray it. No, this guy puts it in bowls. I've seen Ron Paul voters spraying, and then there's that Crow 777 guy who boils it. This guy puts it in bowls.
And see what happens. One of my bowls, I use all different kinds of stone.
Jacob Menden says that's why the neighborhood smells like weed and vinegar. It's also why you have blue skies.
And ceramic bowls that I've repurposed. This is an old ramen bowl that got chipped and broken, so I put that out here. Now I'll do a simple decree. Mighty I am presence and great cosmic light, project thy mighty light rays in and throughout the earth, establishing thy currents throughout the atmosphere of the earth.
Okay, Buzzy says, sure, I'm glad RFK Jr. is going to stop the international dumping of heavy metal nanoparticulates in our atmosphere. Yeah, that's not happening. Again, climate change, chemtrail stuff, that's all just dystopic fantasy propaganda designed to make each side hate the other side because each side is convinced the other side is going to destroy the earth. It's not going to happen. But again, here we go. This guy is doing his decree. He's praying to the I am presence. What God is that?
Throughout the atmosphere of the earth, and cause all destructive qualities and their activities to cease to exist. In this I decree, through my mighty I am presence.
Okay.
And here it
is. Boiled vinegar to evaporate concentrate.
Some white vinegar that I boiled in a clay pot that is evaporating on my back lawn. Wait an hour and see what happens.
Okay, so I had pictured Crow 777 with a cauldron of boiling vinegar in his backyard, like dancing around it. No, they're boiling it inside, and then they're letting it evaporate outside. So that's two different things. It says here it gets rid of chemtrails in 1 to 2 hours. Does it say that on the back of the vinegar bottle? Does anyone here have a bottle of distilled white vinegar? Look on the back and see if it says gets rid of chemtrails in 1 to 2 hours. And is that 1 to 2 hours with the decrees or without? Do the decrees speed it up? Does the I am presence of the universe speed up the rate at which vinegar dissolves chemtrails?
Well, that's cool.
2 hours later, those were gone. The trails were gone. Wow. And you know, if he didn't do that, this is the thing. If he didn't do the decrees, if he didn't boil vinegar, if he didn't let it evaporate in his backyard, those trails would still be there to this day. So, Lord Dorkington says, I'm going to try to use this, see if my HOA will make a new rule. You know, you could probably do this at a park and invite people, and people would show up. Like, people can be made to believe all sorts of things. The other day I mentioned how if I saw cats in space, I would believe it, because I don't think that cats could crisis act. I don't think they're complicit enough. I don't think you could get cats to dangle from a bungee cord and sit still for an entire live segment on the ISS movie stage. And someone had corrected me, and they sent me this link. Here are cats in 0G.
In these experiments, you can see the disorientation resulting when an animal is suddenly placed in a weightless state. Cats, when dropped under normal conditions, will invariably rotate their bodies longitudinally in midair and land on their feet. This automatic reflex action is almost completely lost under weightlessness.
All right, so what you're seeing here on the screen are just cats being tossed around on a parabolic flight. But it's important to note how what you see on a parabolic flight is nothing like you see on the ISS, where they're very static. You would not be able to pull this off. They would not sit still. So no, you couldn't have cats on the ISS. They wouldn't be able to fake space. They're too controlling. They wouldn't allow themselves to sit there without righting themselves. Okay, continuing here. Okay, Patricia Steer says, happy belated birthday. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. I hardly noticed it. I was busy working on other things. Okay, that's good to know. Apparently, Sync Lloyd says it's good for word salads. Okay, good for decrees. That decree was pretty wild. But I've seen a lot of people praying at chemtrails. It's not an uncommon thing. Pippi Langstrip says no more pickles or tomatoes in the sky. Yeah, I'm just pointing it out. The simple fact that the loaded question allows a bad premise to get smuggled past one's critical thinking. It's like a mind virus. And I call Infinite Plane Radio mind virus inoculation. If you believe in chemtrails, you just have to be able to admit to yourself that you're merely and only a believer, that you don't know for sure. You couldn't prove it. And if you really believed it, like from the bottom of your heart, if you truly believed it, you were truly scared, you'd be wearing a mask. And you've never seen a chemtrail truther wearing a mask. They're anti-maskers. It's like they should have been wearing masks this whole time, if they really believed in it. Patricia Steer says, I use 30% strength landscape vinegar for weeds in my yard instead of poisons. Don't get it on any plants you want to live, though. Okay, well, I'd like to know, maybe you could tell by looking at satellite imagery, but has there been a clear patch of sky over your area where you live since you've been using vinegar on the weeds? Because if there's any truth to the chemtrail theory, you would probably be experiencing blue skies. Like, your neighbor should thank you for that. All right, moving on here. Oh, by the way, I watched that movie. Someone had suggested that I watch the movie called Blink Twice, and I do have some notes on it. Blink Twice, Channing Tatum, and it was important to watch it, I think, for a few reasons. Someone had said it was the P. Diddy concurrent programming elements. And then there's the mind control aspects, and Channing Tatum was just in Fly Me to the Moon, which is about the simulated moon landings, which were passed on to the public as real in order to win the space race. That's actually what happened. Although they weren't faking the moon landing to trick the Russians to win the space race. They were faking the moon landing to trick mankind, Americans and Russians and everybody else. Because the they isn't America versus Russians, it's the programmers versus the masses. So it was a propaganda victory, but it wasn't merely against the Russians. It was against everybody. And nobody went to the moon, like literally. There's no reason to believe it literally happened. But mentally, yeah, lunacy. They dragged us into a simulation. Mankind collectively had a schizoid break from objective reality when we adopted this worldview based on this miracle. You know, a man walking on the moon is like Jesus walking on water. This was a miracle that vindicated everything they said, validated their sciences, and it made the one world religion of Nasatology the official religion. It trumps all the other ones. Their religion actually took us into the heavens. Bodily, did miracles up there. Okay, so Blink Twice. It has elements of Epstein Island, but then the party scenes, all the characters are dressed in white. And the Diddy store, if you followed this at all, they had these parties referred to as the White Party, which is an annual event. So this was likely an inspiration. But here we have Diddy and his White Party, very famous events, dressed in white. And this is the type of events they were having in the movie Blink Twice. And as they're having their party on the island, there's this photographer taking pictures of everybody with the implications of blackmail material, etc. It reminded me of Dario Argento, Suspiria, the original version, as far as the movie goes. You know, it's well shot, nice movie. I mean, it was actually rather good, I think. But as far as the main theme of it, you have a black female protagonist. The two women have to fight back against the men, who are obviously very sexist and controlling. So there's a subtext here. And at the very end, the two women protagonists who overcome the bad guys share a cigarette. One of them asks the other for a light. And I think that's a callback to the cigarette as a symbol of women's lib. All of this would seem to be concurrent with the Harris event, with Harris on the world stage. And now you have Nick Fuentes, which fits right into this. So again, Nick Fuentes has just gone viral for saying, "Your body's our choice," you know, gloating over Trump's victory. And he was doxxed on X. So I've been following this story today because there's a hate mob out for him there in Chicago. And look, here's some examples. So this has to do with, again, this movie. I think the movie Blink Twice had a couple of elements to it. One of them is about how the people on the island are put into this alternate reality. And then the second element of it is obviously something about sexism. And here's some signs put up by the Proud Boys. Trump is your daddy again. Trump won. Hose lost. So the floodgates have been somewhat opened. And then Fuentes comes out and he went viral with the phrase, "Your body, my choice." And now all of his personal details have been doxed on Twitter by women. And I've been going through the threads here, and there are people out for his blood. In fact, a lot of people are driving by his house and taking pictures. So he went on Google and he blurred out his house. He made it blurry on Google Images, on Google Earth, which doesn't really help. But I've been seeing a lot of people, like Azoth says, his house, our eggs, our toilet paper. Consequences, FAFO. Wow, that's a lot of public hate speech for someone that lives in Latin King territory. Living in fear is what your body, my choice boy deserves. Better move fast, Nicky boy, says bitch lasagna. Yan says, I'm not pro-doxing, but this guy deserves it. It goes on and on. Another Shiva the Crow says, these Nazi Fs will find out what resistance looks like. Nick's face, my loathing. It's pretty bad. Here we go. This is Doom Herald. Doxing's a crime. That's true, it is. But nobody here cares. Someone says take the home tour. There's so many people just calling for Nick Fuentes to be driven out of suburban Chicago. The only reason they're so mad is they have this clip which is infuriating if you listen to it out of context. But if you knew the full context is the guy's a Poe. He's a parody of extremism. And he's saying things meant to be shocking to his intended audience. If he labeled it comedy, he wouldn't get the flack. In fact, he'd probably have a Netflix special. Travis Cloud says, in that movie, the serpent showed the women the truth. Oh, that's interesting. You're right about that. Now, there may be something to that. I'll have to think about the snake thing, because there was a lot with the snake. I just noticed that the old witchy woman with the snake and the snake poison reminded me of this character from Suspiria. But I may watch it again. Channing Tatum again. When you look at these actors, you have to look at all the roles they're playing. And so here he is in two different roles that have to do with deception and putting people into a simulation. And there's a lot of lunar stuff in this movie. And so a lot of lunar stuff, goddess imagery. So I'm going to have to look into it a little deeper. But my cursory look at it was, it had some heavy women's lib, anti-misogyny messaging, along with this idea of programming. And then you had Gina Davis, who was aware of the abuse that was happening when they were under this drug, and she defends it. And so when she's taken out by the protagonist, it's almost like it's conveying the message that the defenders of a system need to go, even if they would be on their side. It's like, doesn't matter that she's a woman. The fact that she's defending the system made her an enemy. So the movie had this very much, I think it was a women's lib thing, but definitely the cigarette at the end confirmed that. If you haven't seen Fly Me to the Moon, it's a romantic comedy. It's pretty nauseating at certain points, but it is a big reveal. It almost felt like a PSA. Like if NASA had to tell us, yeah, we faked the moon landing because we had to trick the Russians, this is how they would have done it. They would have done it in the form of a comedy where it's been made into a joke. The movie had multiple references to Boeing and disasters, likely predictive programming. But it was essentially a PSA that revealed that it was faked, and here's the reasons why. Don't be mad at us. Americans can take pride in the fact they tricked the Russians, but all the other moon landings were real. And this is not a new talking point, and it may be the default. When everybody finds out the moon landing was hoaxed, instead of saying it's all fake, they'll say, well, that was fake because we had to. So again, you can tell the truth, but if you're telling it from within the box, which is situated upon an edifice of lies, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're telling the truth, because look where you are. It has to be put in the proper context. And the proper context is skepticism, objectivity, the off-world stage. It can't be within Trutherville. If you're in Trutherville yelling out the truth, it's just going to fall on deaf ears. All right, let's see here. I bookmarked a number of quotes against Fuentes, so I won't be surprised if he is driven out of Chicago. I'll be following this closely. And for the record, I don't care about this person. I think he's an actor. I think Laura Loomer, Nick Fuentes, all these annoying right-wing provocateurs and agitators, Stu Peters, these individuals are all being paid for their ability to rile people up. And I think Fuentes may have been recruited because he's a comedian, and for some reason, they like to use comedians to throw out the biggest bombs. They like to use comedians as a way of maybe even softening things. The new European Union election special, their cover art has the Statue of Liberty with a pistol to the side of the head. So this symbol, or this image of the gun to the side of the head, it's a reoccurring theme. We see it in Taxi Driver with Robert De Niro, which inspired John Hinckley Jr. to shoot Reagan. Then we have, of course, the connection with Robert De Niro in the Joker movie, where he's shot by the Joker, and the Joker is based on Travis Bickle. But De Niro consistently has this hand gesture in his movies, like even The Deer Hunter, but it's a reoccurring theme. So then I see Joker 2, and even on the trailer, and the trailer was probably better than the movie. Lady Gaga has a scene in the trailer where she puts her fingers to her head and pulls a trigger when she sees Joker, which is like, wait, that's almost referencing Taxi Driver. Not coincidental, just more of the same, and just noticing these as they come up. 1-900 Shed Dog says, "Good evening, Timothy. I've come aboard the raft." Now, have you ever called that number? Yes, Jungle Jim. More Trump assassin talk coming up in the news. It's constant. Yeah, it's all going to set the stage for the big one, which was pretty much outlined, I think, accurately the way it's going to happen in Megalopolis. And Megalopolis was about Trump. You can't say it's not. You have the group called Make Rome Great Again marching around. And they had this plan for like Megalopolis, which sounds like Magalopolis, which I think is accurate. So many strange aspects of that movie. And I think the movie makes the most sense when you recognize that it's Francis Ford Coppola's movie about the fall of America as Rome. And he was hanging out with Robert De Niro recently during an interview, and he said that it's prescient and it's about to come true. But that movie has footage from 9/11 in it. It was going to be produced and released prior to 9/11 happening, and the 9/11-01 attacks caused Coppola to pause the movie's production and wait 20 years. Because the movie is essentially about 9/11. It's about the 9/11ing of New York, but it's by Russia with some satellite falling to the earth. But the movie, to be, I think, properly understood, you have to recognize that the main character looks like Neo by design. His relationship with Lawrence Fishburne's character is very much like Morpheus, where Morpheus is explaining the Matrix. In Megalopolis, Lawrence Fishburne's character is explaining the nature of time. So one is about the space we inhabit, the other is about time, and this time-space theme ties into Saturn, and this is where the Dark City, which came out around the same time as the Matrix, Dark City elements are heavily, I think throughout this entire Megalopolis, actually, they're heavily present there. There's these characters called the Design Authority who correlate to the Strangers in Dark City. You have all the clock imagery because it's all about time control. But here's how it connects to everything. The Strangers, they're these men in black hats, black rims, and they control time. And it's all just symbolic. So the idea that they can stop time and they detonate something in New York, well, that's showing how every fake news event is exerting control over time. They decide when this fake thing's going to happen, and they insert it into the world stage. The Design Authority in Megalopolis is the metascriptors. It's those who control the big picture that the news conveys. The PSYOP Entertainment Complex. Who is it? Well, it's the Design Authority. And this movie Megalopolis shows it pretty clearly. But the main character is both Neo. It has elements of Dark City. His name is Caesar. And he's got multiple connections to Trump. He represents Trump on the world stage. At the end of the movie, at the Saturnalia celebration, Elvis is performing, and he's singing Trump's inauguration song from 2017, which is kind of weird. And he's wrapped in an American flag. He also gets a head wound, and 3 days later or something comes back to life, just like Neo dies for 72 seconds, representing 3 days. Quite a lot about that movie I could get into, Megalopolis, but my point of it mainly is simply that the director suggested that it's going to happen again. Rome's going to fall, America as Rome, and it's coming up, and it has heavy foreshadowing for the head wound. He's like signing a child's autograph. A child asks him to autograph a book or something, and then the child's an assassin and shoots him in the eye, in the right eye. And again, he heals from it, and after he heals from it, the world is then united as one. And they get rid of the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States, and they replace it with the Pledge of Allegiance to humanity. Yes, Lane Dion, the Penguin show is actually fire. Yeah, I think tomorrow is the season finale. The Penguin is one of the best series I've ever seen, And I often point out how the deep fakery pre-existed digital deep fakes and filters, but rather the old spycraft, stagecraft, disguises. These are all aspects of deep fakery employed by the intelligence agencies and the media from the very beginning. And long before digital deepfakes, where you could put Tom Cruise's face on somebody else's body using some app, you had these hyper-realistic masks that are foolproof. And they've been foolproof for decades. In 2015, the truth about these things was declassified, and you can find videos by Jonah Mendez, who was a director of disguise at the CIA for 27 years, talking about this. You could have 6 individuals that all look like Saddam Hussein standing in front of you, and you wouldn't know who was the real one. None of them are, but the point of it is, that's how good this technology has always been. So I'm watching Penguin, and I didn't know that the Penguin was Colin Farrell. I didn't know until I started watching it. I just assumed, hey, they got this actor who has a very unique look, and he perfectly embodies the Penguin. No, it's a mask. So it's another example of how the difference between real and fake, it's not always easy to tell. And even if you're trained to it, even if you look at media habitually for fakery, the really good stuff just slips on by. So they inserted a fake person, and I had no idea he was fake. Buzzy says, my bets is they'll fake his death, manufacture civil war, use it as a pretext to depopulate America and set up a China-style government with Emperor Joe Biden in charge. My social credit score is so deep in the red that if that happens, I'm done. What can I do to fix that? Like, if I voted for Harris, not saying I did, but if I did that improve my social credit score? Piano Andante says, in Buddhism, Maga means path, dark Maga, dark path. Yeah, okay, I think, so we talked about Megalopolis as make America roam again. And we often talk about New York, and the One World Trade Tower is a symbol of the Tower of Babel. All kinds of symbolism here connecting these various like biblical motifs, and it's all by design. So the Trump hat MAGA. MAGA means also witch. And yeah, it's definitely connected to the Satanic Church. It's just the feminine form of Magus. Like Gandalf is a mage, but the feminine form would be MAGA. So witch, but it's a scarlet hat. And so you can find tie-ins with Revelation and the Babylon the Fallen, where she has this scarlet. Again, we're talking about the Revelation 17. You have the Whore of Babylon talking about Babylon is fallen. And I'm thinking, this is like, if you think about it, if America is Babylon, then what Trump is saying with Make America Great Again is America is fallen. That's what he's saying. America has fallen, so we need to make it great again. And then there's the fact that MAGA is written across the brow, and then she, of course, is described as a sorceress. And you could look at pharmaceuticals or perhaps even the vax as an example of sorcery, but the scarlet is a very significant color in this context, and of course MAGA is a witch, and it's across the brow. This is all very biblical in its full context, and it's all by design. I have another example here I was just looking at today. Others are putting these pieces together. Revelation 13:1, the beast of the sea that emerges has a wound on one of its heads. And you have this. And, for a long time, there was an expression among the QAnoners that it was going to be, quote, biblical. That the end events were going to be biblical. And it's because clearly they are drawing from their, as far as the script goes, they're drawing inspiration from the Bible in ways that will, I guess, resonate with a lot of people. But MAGA, again, is just saying Babylon the Fallen. Patricia Steer says, I missed your take on things. Get withdrawals, your handshakes for 33 seconds. This is the only think tank that's taken this stance, and it's going to maintain it. And I hope that the parallel media expands and anybody who's on this side of the screen can kind of pool together. Because there should be a lot more content just really taking a stance that the mass media deception itself is based on a model that can be deconstructed. And this goes outside of being engaged in politics. This falls into more like philosophy. Okay, let's continue. I'm looking at your comments here. Lean Dion says, it's weird the election wasn't drawn out and contested for ages. Makes people think the process was genuine again. Interesting point. And Trump's lucky. He's lucky he got the 47. I think so, because if Kamala had taken that, then all of his merchandise would have just been ruined. All right, moving on. And people still think that was real. And the MAGAs don't want to hear it. Okay, here we go. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed, and the whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. And this is a post from someone on Twitter who is connecting the term followed the beast to Twitter itself, where you have to follow them. Kind of a literal interpretation. There are a lot of people who are more or less ensconced in Normieville who are taking note of the Revelation 13:3, the head wound, the people marveling at the beast. And, I wonder, is this it? Like, did they already play this card? Is this as much of a head wound as we're going to get? Or is this a precursor to something bigger? And my first thinking on it was, okay, they're cheapskates. They can't do the full-blown head wound. And they're probably going to just do this ear thing because it's all they can do. But then, having looked at it more closely, we have found many examples that this was actually predicted. Concurrent programming, predictive programming, the ear wound thing is a more or less prophesied by mass media. It is something that was predicted. If I just saw on Amazon, if it's Batman Caped Crusader season finale, Batman throws a boomerang at this character called Rupert Thorne, who's basically Trump, and it clips his right ear. That was animated before Trump's ear was clipped. Matt Armitage says, Babylonia money magic brought to the U.S. a long time ago. Okay, speaking of Babylonia money magic and the Tower of Babel stuff with New York, the back of the dollar bill has the all-seeing eye, and beneath it, it has the Roman numerals for 1776. And this has a couple of connections, one of them being 1776 AD is when America is founded, and then, of course, 1776 in the pyramid. It makes sense. Here's the seal. And the all-seeing eye, Great Seal of the United States. And this was shown at the day one of the RNC. Like Trump comes out with his bandage on his ear. We'll make America wealthy again, and you have the big pyramid here. And then I mentioned this. The 1776 AD has a connection to 1776 AL. According to lore, 120 years after the Great Flood, the Tower of Babel's construction begins. And this is 1776 AL, which is the year of light. So according to the Masonic calendar, the number 1776 has the significance of being, this is when the Tower of Babel's construction begins. So America begins, same number. A couple deeper connections, though. The Great Pyramid in Gaza is 5,776 inches tall. So the height of the tower, the height of the pyramid, 5,776. 1776 AD is 5776 AL, according to the old calendar. So there's a connection between the Tower of Babel, the Great Pyramid, and America's founding. And then finally, the One World Trade Tower is 1,776 feet tall. And so there you have another connection. 1776, One World Trade Tower. And if you look at it up close, if you walked up to it and you looked up, it looks like the completed pyramid with the capstone having descended upon it. So 1776 also connects to the height, and it connects it to that pyramid, which is also, again, connected to the years of the building of the Tower of Babel and America. Yeah, I meant Giza. Did I say Gaza? And I have a few other things I could add into this, but that's just kind of an overview. The significance of the One World Trade Tower being in New York, where the two towers were, also significant. 13 years after the twins go down, the One World Trade Tower goes up, opens on 11/3/2014, and Donald Trump was part of this committee that was trying to decide what to replace the twins with, and he proposed the World Trade Center Phoenix. Probably too obvious, if you think about it. It's one of those things where you can't be too obvious, so they couldn't just call it that. But again, so Babylon as New York is not a new concept. You've got, or New York is Babylon. You have the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, which is the largest cathedral in the world. And it has, famously, it has these pillars where the carvings have New York being bowled over by like tidal waves or something. And these carvings predated 9/11, but it looks very 9/11-y. So here you go. Spot the Twin Towers on the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. It depicts New York as the new Babylon and the most powerful city in the world. And here you can see. So this is depicting this reoccurring theme, which we talk about here quite a lot, that the fall of the West is symbolized by the sinking of the Titanic, the sinking of the Twin Towers. And I think that this is and this is something else in Megalopolis. At the very beginning, it says that empires don't end overnight, but it takes place over time as people cease to believe in it. So it's a construct that's being taken down, that's sinking. And so there's a lot of connections we've already discussed with the Titanic as a metaphor for the sinking of the West. James Cameron's The Titanic from 1997 has predictive programming for 9/11 with the sinking Titanic in two parts, like two towers. And on 9/11, 2001, James Cameron was at the site of the sunken Titanic as the twins sink. And there are many predictive programming suggestions that the final stage of this is when the space station, which symbolizes the Tower of Babel in the sense it's all mankind in one mission from Earth to the heavens, trespassing into the heavens, really. But you have the one world order, in a sense, the one world Nasatology cult, and everybody's a part of this mission to ascend into the heavens. It's a continuation of this idea, and I think it has to fall as well. So I think it's in stages. I think that's what we're waiting on. So it's interesting that Megalopolis begins with space junk, with a satellite coming down to Earth, destroying New York. And when the movie was being, I think it was at some film festival, but anyway, when Megalopolis was being screened initially, at that exact same time, a Russian satellite exploded in space, and they had to go into shelter at the ISS. So it's foreshadowing. It's foreshadowing that the next 9/11, the next big event that is, of course, going to connect with the same storyline, is likely going to involve space. Mango says, your audience grows, Tim, 125. Oh, we have 187 on the video channels, and we probably have another 50 scattered on, I think, Odyssey and a couple others. Then, of course, the audio streams. So we're over 200 listening. So if you're listening now and you want to join the chat, go to ips.monster. If you want to call in, I'll open up phones. It's 505-510-4226. List of topics. Anti-Trump protesters gathering around the Space Needle. I actually have some footage from that. Here they are in New York.
Yeah, that's what they told us. They said
Now, for several years, I've been hearing about how the open borders are allowing millions of immigrants to come in and steal the vote. Like, what happened to that narrative? Was it just fear mongering all along? Here we have Black Bloc Antifa with their umbrellas preparing to go to war with Seattle PD, and they're gathering around the Space Needle. Conscious Reality says, Tim, what do you think about if Biden steps down between now and January 20th, 2025 and Kamala becomes the president? I think it would be funny. I think it would be great. I think it'd be a great plot twist because it would invalidate all the merch, all the tattoos, all the decals, anything with 47 on it would suddenly belong to them. I think it would be funny. I don't think they'll do it. I think it would be too big of a disaster. But if they did, it would be equivalent to, I don't know. It's like, Trump, his branding is everything. It's like Trump has his name on that tower. Taking Trump's name off one of his towers would obviously hurt the guy and it would be demoralizing. If they took 47 away from him, it would be devastating. And that would happen if Biden steps down. Okay, continuing, looking at protesters gathering around the Space Needle, yelling and stuff like it does anything. Oh, this is an update for the whole squirrel story. Peanut the squirrel. And I did watch that movie. It was terrible and generic. It was called Apocalypse Z, about rabies, like a rabies zombie virus. It was the #1 movie, and I watched it just as the story was that Peanut and the raccoon were euthanized so they could be tested for rabies because you have to be dead. And this, of course, was precipitated by, we're talking about these influencers. So it was a squirrel and a raccoon who were the pets of these influencers. It was like a pet video blog. Well, they were taken into custody and killed and tested for rabies because somebody supposedly called the authorities and reported that these animals were in this person's house and they were somehow illegal. Anyway, her name was Monica Kessler. Well, she didn't actually do it. So the school teacher and mother of twins was identified as the person who reported Peanut the squirrel to the New York authorities. Well, there was an open records request, and it turns out that she has been exonerated. She did not do it. The woman identified as the person who reported Peanut the squirrel is innocent, and they did an open records thing, so just spreading the news here. Her lawyer has filed additional Freedom of Information Act requests for all the complaints related to this. And she recently did an interview. She's been getting death threats, fake bomb packages sent to her house. A lot of blowback, and she had to prove her innocence. What is the significance of the story? I thought it was a psyop from day one. I mean, this could be part of it, because right before this, it seemed like there was this attempt by the demagogues, and that's what we're looking at with a lot of these provocateurs, these agitators, to make people think that in Springfield, Ohio, Haitian immigrants were eating people's pets. And of course, that story ran through its cycle. It trended, it was talked about, and then people forgot about it. But then this came out where, oh, look, now the government's going to get your pets. So it's either the leftist government, the Democrats opening borders to people who will take your pets, or the government will take your pets. So in both instances, it was the right wing agitated at this idea of pet insecurity. Our pets are being threatened. JG5 says, hey guys, just got here, been missing all lately. Yeah, subscribe at ips.monster and get all of the... Oh, that's interesting. Piano has something here. You'll get the notifications, go to ips.monster. Piano and Dante says 4 plus 5 and 4 plus 7. See that? It gives you a 911, and then 454 gives you 13, and then you have 7. His assassination date. Interesting. Well, the 4547 is on the side of his hat. And that is, I think, a callback to Full Metal Jacket, where the character Joker has the target on his helmet. And in a subtextual analysis of Full Metal Jacket, Joker is based on JFK. And there's all kinds of JFK jokes in the movie if you haven't seen Full Metal Jacket, Kubrick. And so when I saw that Trump was wearing a 45 on the side of his head, and even at his bar, his whiskey bar, and he's a teetotaler, he doesn't drink, but he has a shot glass called Trump 45 with a 45 round in the side of it. So we're looking at this 45 on the side of his hat as a callback, likely, to Stanley Kubrick, that this is an evidence of Kubrick having directed this future event. So Kubrick directed the JFK assassination, 9/11, 2020, largely his work. And of course, he's obviously passed, but as a metascriptor, his directions, his work extended into the future. He supposedly died right before Eyes Wide Shut came out, which I don't believe he actually died at that time. I think there's reasons to think that was also faked, and he died after, likely after 9/11, which would have been his magnum opus. But when I saw the 45 on the side of Trump's head, I said, that's got to be a signature Kubrick touch, and that's where he's going to get shot. And the shooter was aiming for that spot. That's why I say that if you got a MAGA hat with the 45-47, squeeze the hyphen and see if any fake blood comes out, if it's got a built-in squib. 1-900 Shed Dog says, who directed Waco? Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, so I would say James Cameron had a huge part in 9/11. James Cameron could be credited with LA riots, with the Cop City protests in Atlanta. So it's interesting to go back and see what directors are involved in what psyop. I think Jordan Peele and Spike Lee are both connected with the George Floyd event. And you can find them even admitting this kind of between the lines. Jordan Peele said Nope was inspired by the George Floyd event. So the Waco event, who directed that? That's a good question. It was 1.6 million rounds. So you have 1/6. Think January 6th, years in advance. Who was the face of Waco as far as like the activists? Alex Jones. Who was the face of 1/6? Alex Jones as far as the right-wing leadership. Waco was 419. Radicalized Alex Jones, radicalized Timothy McVeigh, and McVeigh retaliated with the Oklahoma City bombings on 419. And of course, 419, Dave Koresh was 33. He was incinerated. And when Trump was in the courthouse on 419, Maxwell Azarello incinerated himself outside of the courthouse. So you have this Burning Man theme. And he did so to protest world fascism and money, all this stuff, which is very consistent with the Joker kill the rich theme, class warfare stuff. And Maxwell Azarello even wore a shirt that said, eat the rich. Trump kicked off his 2024 campaign in Waco, the day after Netflix releases Waco, American Apocalypse. I found many interesting connections between this, but it's all because Waco is the genesis of the domestic violent extremism on the right. Waco is where it all begins. The whole theme of they're going to take your guns comes from Waco and the ATF. But again, it's a clue. Waco, 1.6 million rounds. Alex Jones goes on Piers Morgan and says the DHS has purchased 1.6 billion hollow point rounds to take out patriots, and if they try to take our guns, 1776 will commence again. So you have the 1.6, 16, 16 consistently referenced, and that's because it's been planned decades in advance. January 6th was entirely a psyop. It's not like it was some random thing. A bunch of people just got up one day and decided to go storm the Capitol. No, I mean, Trump even said in 2017, he said, this is the calm before the storm. And they said, what does this mean? Well, he knew that the storming of the Capitol was going to be a major plot twist, a major historic event. And these events are all fake. They make history. And predictive programming is evidence of fakery. So here we have it again. Trump won now what? From The Atlantic. Looking at this image, this is from a source of previous examples of predictive programming for the Trump ear wound. So the ear wound was one thing. The next one looks like it's going to hit his temple. That's what it looks like. Conscious Reality says Candyman and the man who did the voice of AOL died on the same day, Tony Todd and Elwood Edwards, 69 and 75. Oh yeah, the Candyman series. Good actor, great actor actually for that genre, and very distinctive and trademark voice. And when it comes to any of these actors, it's always suspect. The obsession with death dates and birth dates is one of the consistent features of the PSYOP entertainment complex. So I don't take their death dates for granted. Tomanoid3 says, the Day of the Jackal new series opens with Mission Impossible style masks. Also the Radiohead song from Vanilla Sky. You know, there was, I think it was Simon Shack was talking about the Vanilla Skies on 9/11. How the footage was obviously faked. They probably used miniatures, and the sky seemed like it was, maybe they made it this way on purpose so that you wouldn't be able to compare it to the real weather of the day. But the skies did look kind of distinctly vanilla. And the movie Vanilla Sky, Tom Cruise, has predictive programming for 9/11 and for even 2020, even for COVID. So here is Tom Cruise in Vanilla Sky. He's the CEO, owner of a company, a publisher called, they do a magazine called Rise. And Rise is a huge theme. It's all about the risen savior. It's about Osiris. It's this sun god motif. He's 33 years old. He dies, has a 3-day funeral, and he's resurrected by Sophia, played by Penelope Cruz. Sophia is a very significant name in this context, the embodiment of wisdom. But the movie is about the Gnostic Christ and then Sophia being the Magdalene and this resurrection. It has the Scarlet Woman connection, which is this reoccurring theme. It's a representation of the goddess. But yeah, this movie is totally a cult. But it opens up where he and his girlfriend are faking like they have a cold so they can stay in from work. And he has this dream of New York being vacant, like everybody's on lockdown. Tom Cruise, again, plays a 33-year-old. He's got all kinds of connections to that number. He divorced all his wives at 33, for example. I've done a number of breakdowns on Top Gun 2 and some of his other works, but it's very consistent. He's always depicted as a hanged man, the hero, the archetypal hero. And of course, the idea of the hero is like, and the sun, is it's the sun who defeats the darkness. And so there's this Jesus Christ of Scientology thing. And Scientology is not merely a cult that can be mocked by South Park, but it's kind of a template space religion. And it's no different than Nasatology. Nasatology has better special effects. Scientology has better actors. But it's the same paradigm. And moreover, the Scientology model is kind of based on Catholicism, but also the pandemic, which is the mainstream media is the default religion. Their concept of sin, they call the virus. Quarantining quarantines you from what? The people who don't believe the mainstream news, the antis, the vax refuseniks, the unsaved. And so the Scientology has this model for their religion, which is basically you have to quarantine against those who carry mind viruses, which they term engrams. So if you can imagine the world locking down for mind viruses until everybody's been cleared, like everybody, and it's treated like an infection, like a contagious disease, where if you go around people who haven't been saved, you can catch their mind viruses. That explains how Scientology actually operates, that it's based on a quarantine model from non-Scientologists. But ultimately, it's a space religion heavily built on quarantining from a concept of sin, which they call the engram, which has been reintroduced into the world in the form of the mind virus. So now we already have our space religion of Nasatology. We have the worldview. We have the cosmology. But now we have the virus as reinvented in 2020 as this ubiquitous threat that can be exacerbated by misinformation. mind viruses correlated with the real virus, a threat to everybody. So we're entering into a new world religion, which is likely closer to Scientology than Nasatology. One 900 Shed Dog says, squirrel is code for the upcoming famine. Squirrels save their nuts like nature's preppers. You know who's not going to starve in the coming famine? Alex Jones. He's already made plans, contingency plans. His daughters aren't going to starve. He will eat his neighbors. Nicotrama says, someone made the argument that people don't have kids anymore, so they're targeting the pets to trigger us. Makes sense. Interesting. I've heard that too. I wonder. See, I don't know if it's true that people aren't having kids anymore, but for those who don't have kids, and I guess you're right, in the culture, there are like pet moms, and I think you might be onto something with that. Incels. Okay, if I was an incel, I would probably have a bunch of pets. And the idea that somebody could take my pet would be infuriating. Yeah, I think I could see that working. But who directed Waco? Anybody have any guesses? We need to, I'll do this as part of AutoHoaxCon. I'll have to dedicate, maybe this next one I'll do it. Let's try to connect the directors and the scripters to the corresponding fake news events that follow their fakery. 1900 Shed Dog says, I figured out the cube symbolism relates to the trappings of consciousness inside limited dimensional space. Exactly. The cube, of course, you have the symbol of the hexagram, which is associated with Saturn. Saturn rules over time and space. It's the reaper, the grim reaper, death at the end of the cycle, the harvest. So it's the agrarian cycle, and each cycle, begins and ends, and then begins again. But it always ends with the reaper, and the father time is always shown with the scythe. Images of Kronos often depict him eating a baby or biting a child, and then you have Saturn devouring his child. You have Abraham with a knife about to stab Isaac. So Abraham is a Saturn symbol. He's an archetype. And the devouring the child, the killing the child, that isn't literal, but it's about time consuming you from the moment that you're born. So you're dying from the moment that you're born. You're a baby and time is already consuming you. You can find images of I don't know what it's called. There's a statue that has this demon-looking god thing with 12 little people around these eating, and it symbolizes the year eating each month. It's just symbolism. But Saturn is a symbol of constraints, time, and space control. And you can find the cube symbolism throughout a lot of the media that we consume and observe. And the cube is a symbol of the material realm, and of course matter. And there's a lot of support for this idea if you just examine the subtext of a lot of the movies. So I do like to look at the occult side or the underpinnings, and I try to understand their symbolism. But you're totally right. The cube, Saturn, time, space, control. And that's why it makes so much sense that we see the symbolism correlated with all the fake news and the mass media. The black cube TV, your TV set, or your phone, the black monolith, it's the same thing. It represents the control of time and space, and they control time and space through, mostly time is through fake history and fake news. But also by projecting an end, a constraint on time. And in Megalopolis, it was the design authority who were obviously right out of Dark City. And in Dark City, you had the symbol of the clock and the men in black. Well, the clock, Chronos, time, and of course the time controllers. There's quite a lot also to correlate the number 666 with the material realm, the number of man, carbon, and the idea of the material realm being something of a temporal prison for spiritual beings, or spirit descended into matter. Why is Cruz's hair standing up like that, says Diana Southard. Oh, he's on top of a building, and he has been told that he lives in a simulation. And he has to decide whether he's willing to jump off the building and re-enter the real world or stay within the simulation. Vanilla Sky has a lot of layers to it. It's very well thought out. Every single song, every lyric, it all ties into the same subtext, which is this basically portraying Tom Cruise as a sort of a Gnostic Christ. Like, okay, for example, there's one scene where he's singing "What if God was one of us?" I don't know the saint. No, I think this is the song's name. Just a slug like one of us, and he's singing the song about a slug trying, like basically, it was kind of a reveal of the concept of like the Kabbalistic tree of life, and that the emanation of light from above manifesting in the material realm is basically where we are, that we are deceived if we think that we're merely slugs, but we're actually gods. And that's what I mean by the Gnostic Christ, because he recognizes he's in control of everything. He's in a bar, and the tech support says, these people are only here because they're extensions of you. You're the center of it all. He doesn't want to believe it. And he tells them all to shut up, and they all freeze. And then he has like this psychotic break because he realizes that he's in a sim. Now, good point there. Diana Southard brings up his hair, and Linda Curtis says Tom's hair versus the ISS. So this is a good point, because when he goes up to the ISS, how are they going to fake his hair? Is it going to stick up straight with hairspray like that ridiculous astronaut Medusa? Are they going to use CGI? In the movie ISS, which came out on 1/19, again, okay, today's 1/19, 11/9. 1/19, reverse 9/11, has a lot of symbolism that we've talked about in all the movies with stuff falling from the sky. I think even Donnie Darko comes out on 1/19. But 11/9, Genesis, Tower of Babel falling. But Tom Cruise is going up on the ISS at some point soon. And I'm like, well, how is he going to do the hair thing? So the movie ISS was coming out on 1/19, and I said, watch. When this movie comes out, the hair on the astronauts is going to look realer than the astronauts on the ISS's hair. And I think they heard me, because they knew that we were going to be watching. Because if his hair floats around naturally, like he's really in 0G, it's going to stand in sharp contrast to the stiff hairsprayed hair of the ISS astronauts, and how they have performed this particular trick for years. So I watched the movie, and disappointingly, there was not one loose hair. All the female astronauts had their hair slicked back in ponytails. There was no free-floating hair. And I also noticed that, and it's a terrible movie, it's Russia versus America fighting for control of the space station. Russia's nuking the world. But they're up on the ISS floating around, and the floating around looks faker than the space station. Like, how did they manage to dumb down their special effects? It's unlike any other science fiction movie. In most science fiction movies, like look at Sandra Bullock in Gravity. And when that movie came out, somebody asked the director what it was like filming in space, and he got laughed at. And I was like, why are they laughing? I, at the time, thought the movie Gravity was filmed in space. Like, I was in the box. I didn't consider space even fakeable. It never even crossed my mind. I mean, that's just how easily fooled people are. But anyway, there's no way he's going to go up into space and have his hair floating around without us noticing, and they're probably going to have to do something. Lucid Stream says, this is an idea in Elvin Boyd Kuhn's book, quote, Who is this King of Glory? Christ is an archetype representing the divine potential in every human being rather than a single historic figure. There's a lot to support that if you look at the significance of the number 33 and its correlation to the vertebrae and the spiritual centers, the chakras along the spine up to the crown of the head, which represent the rising of consciousness. They call it the fire snake. And in this movie, Vanilla Sky, rather, the magazine is called Rise. And in the movie, he had to rise in this tower to the top to be given the story about how it's all a sim. But rising from the dead, the ascension, being connected with the number 33. To leave the earth, you have to go Mach 33. So transcending the material realm. So there's quite a lot in the symbolism throughout all these movies that is what Christ represents. And then you can find strong correlations with the number 33, the Burning Man motif. For example, the first Burning Man in Black Rock City, it's in Black Rock City, Nevada. So you have this Black Rock connection. The first Burning Man was in 1986. They had 33 consecutive ones until 2019. And then 2020 was canceled for COVID. But these 33 Burning Man festivals, and a year after the first one in 1987, and I mean in 86 and in 2019, in both these years, you had a 33-year-old burning himself in front of the White House. If you remember, in 2019 in May, a 33-year-old set himself on fire on the ellipse. And he had a shirt that said USA. So you have a Burning Man with USA on his shirt, and a bus passes by, number 113. I remember noticing then, I was like, something's up with 113, but specifically America burning. And this was, 2019. But I noticed that you had the 33 Burning Man festivals. You had two 33-year-olds burning themselves. And in the 2019 Burning Man, a 33-year-old was reported dead. And then shortly after, you had 33 people burning on it's called the Conception. Some boat out past Santa Barbara burned, and 33 people burned in the Conception. Again, I don't think that was real, but the idea of the Burning Man, the Phoenix, Christ, you can put them all in the same box. Like, these are all symbols for the same thing. Christ, Burning Man, Phoenix, 33, the corona/crown. And by looking at the context, we're able to see these consistent patterns. And it is how they use it. But this is it's like a new age interpretation of Christ. The biblical Christ, I don't know. There's just so much debate. I'm not a literalist at all. Copaesthetic says, oh yeah, Santos Bonachos, good man. Yeah, he's really into this whole concept. I don't go too far with it other than what we can objectively report on. But there is a strong case to be made that the archetype concept, the divine potential, is how the power elites see this figure. Okay, let's move on. If you want to see more about this, look at Top Gun 2. Every single character in that movie has a symbolic name. You got Phoenix. You got Hangman. So Hangman, again, the hanging man, the actor who played Hangman is 33, or was 33 when the movie came out. And he said, I am good, multiple times. He said, I'm your savior, multiple times. Then you had the character named Rooster. Rooster is another symbol of Christ. And the character Rooster was 33, born when his father died in the first movie 33 years before. So you had this theme of the second coming. You had the theme of Christ, second coming, Phoenix, all throughout the movie. And then there's this point where Cruise's character is fighting this guy who has this black mask and it's totally opaque. It looks like Star Wars. Looks like Darth Vader type mask. And he only has 33 rounds left, and they draw attention to it. I got 33 rounds left. This movie this number, the number 33, is just one of many, where these are a very calculated symbols. And I think it's meant to be interpreted by the initiates, because there is an esoteric. There's the exoteric for the outsiders, and there's the esoteric for those who look deeper. There is a deeper storyline that is meant for the initiated, meaning those who've already been told what certain things mean, and who know that there are different layers. Sort of like I talk about the world stage and how it's a model. The people who run this thing know it's a model. The people who are in it don't. They take it literally, as in exoterically. When the whole thing has again, layers. And everything is being exacerbated by the fact that the public is now visually illiterate and cannot tell the difference between real and fake. And sometimes this includes me. November 7th, Carlisle Rivera of Brooklyn and Jonathan Lold Holt of Staten Island are arrested in New York for being part of a plot to kill Donald Trump. It says, big threats on my life by Iran. The entire U.S. military is watching. Moves were already made by Iran. That didn't work out. They will try again. Now, Iran put out this simulation of a drone shooting him on a golf course. And Ryan, which is an anagram for Iran, was the guy, the shooter at the golf course. But yeah, they're keeping this story alive, the hitman thing. Decoding with Cody, interesting channel, says tomorrow is 11/9. It's 8,460 days after 9/11. First tower hit at 8:46. 119 days after Trump was shot. Now, these date connections, rarely are they valid. For the most part, you're looking at sharpshooter fallacy type arguments. But you can't disregard all of them. It's a case-to-case basis. But as a methodology, there's no predictive use in gematria calculators. Busy56 says, I watched an old episode of Batman the Animated Series called Prophecy of Doom. It was about a prophet named Nostradamus who would predict big events like a ship exploding, and that would happen because he would make it happen. He started a secret society where he was tricking all of Gotham's richest people and warning them of economic collapse unless they invested their money with him. He was a con man and a professional actor. His partner was a master of special effects. Crazy episode. They even threw in sun worship and a Shakespeare quote. All in a 20-minute children's cartoon episode. A good example of what I was just talking about. There's no way the children would have any way to understand any of this stuff. It's deliberately going over their head. And it's the same with the mainstream movies. But that's great. Thank you for bringing this up. The idea that they are writing the news and then acting it out on the world stage means that they're essentially fulfilling their own prophecies. And if you take it literally, it might look like they're literally fulfilling prophecy, like there's predestination and a higher power at work. No, but the higher power is the power elite. Leo Pirate says, I'd like to know the Batman the Animated Series episode name. Yeah, if you can post the name so we can look at it and get the clips. These clips are invaluable. You have to see the AutoHoaxCon presentations by Reverse History. He's been gathering a lot of examples of predictive programming, multiple instances in the same cartoons. And these are not isolated. These are not anomalous. And they are indicators of future fakery. It is the absolute proof of a conspiracy. And the conspiracy theorists generally miss it. Like the greatest proof that there is a conspiracy to control the world isn't chemtrails. You know, it's not Q droppings. The best evidence that there's a conspiracy that runs the world is the metascript and that the bending of history. And we can again prove all this. Here's a piece by the Scientific American. Misinformation really does spread like a virus. Going viral appears to be more than a mere catchphrase. So misinformation is now a virus. This is just what I was saying. I said that Scientology is a template for the one world order religion, synthesizing Nasatology, outer space cosmology with the modern concept of sin, which is the virus, merged with the mind virus, which is the engram. So here we have the misinformation is now a virus. Virus is sin. Media is church. Misinformation spreads like a virus. And this is going to get the public to understand disease X and why we need to censor the internet, because disease X is causing all the violence. This is an essay from The Conversation. It says, we're increasingly aware of how misinformation can interfere and influence elections, misleading news, and people struggle to see what's real or false. It's more than a catchphrase. Scientists have found a close analogy between the spread of misinformation and the spread of viruses. And this is because the public has been given mind aids by their government. The public has been taught to consume news passively. If you're consuming news passively, if you're not critically examining if you're not parsing the information, if you're not going through it claim by claim, then you're basically an open receptacle to mind virus infection. And Infinite Plane Radio offers free mind war inoculation. I don't catch mind viruses, but I'm considered to be a mind virus super spreader, a threat to society. I'm asymptomatic of any kind of madness. However, the mind viruses that I traffic in could be picked up and could be contracted by somebody with a weak mental immune system, and then they become the next school shooter. That's the rationale. In 2020, we were taught about the dangers of asymptomatic super spreaders. Now we're ready. The public's been ready for a while, but they're about to accept the idea that we got to do something about these idea super spreaders. How misinformation gets around can be effectively described using mathematical models designed to spread or simulate the spread of pathogens. These concerns are well-founded. Foreign disinformation has grown in sophistication and scope since 2016. In 2024, dangerous conspiracy theories about weather manipulation undermined the management of hurricanes. Fake news about immigrants eating pets incites violence, and you had 33 hoaxed bomb threats they talked about. Misleading election conspiracies amplified by the richest man, Elon Musk. And they have to mention Elon Musk because X and disease X. And he is the leading spreader of mind junk and space junk. They're putting Elon Musk out there to be perceived as a threat to our commons. That mankind has certain things that we share in common spaces. Cyberspace, now endangered by Elon Musk. Outer space, low Earth orbit, now endangered by Elon Musk. And he's using outer space, the commons of low Earth orbit, to spread misinformation. His satellites. But it's not a coincidence. Mind junk, space junk, because the space program has always been about controlling inner space, your mind. And he is deliberately being portrayed this way so the public rejects it. We must reject these billionaires with too much influence. We must not allow individuals to ruin the collective. Like one man's bowl of unheated bat soup shut down the whole world. One man's, whatever his ambitions, one man's desire to purchase social media and put his own opinions into it has caused Trump to win. Like they put this out there and people buy it. Goes on to say, and this is from Scientific American, recent studies employed mathematical models drawn from epidemiology, the study of how diseases occur in populations and why. And these models were developed to study the spread of viruses, but they can be used to study the diffusion of misinformation across social networks. So you remember after Christchurch, when Brenton Tarrant, shout out to PewDiePie, he shoots up the two mosques. And now we know the truth about this. And if you don't know, these are simulations. But as a result of the footage that was released from the first mosque, his GoPro footage, and the guy he should get his money back because that was some grainy footage. But because of that footage that was leaked, BitChute had been shut down in New Zealand. They shut down 4chan, which had to become 8chan. We saw the real-time locking down of segments of the internet to quarantine the rest of us because there's this dangerous mind virus spreading around. They threatened people with arrest for spreading that video. So they already tested this. We've already seen it. It's going to be done, quote, globally. It says one class of epidemiological models that work for misinformation is the susceptible, infectious, recovered model. These simulate the dynamics between the susceptible, the infected, and the resistant individuals. So we are resistant. In the movie series, in the television series Hot Skulls, society was locked down because of mind viruses. And the government required that you wear earplugs because the people who are spreading these conspiracy theories can infect you with their mind viruses. And they were studying this character, the protagonist, who seemed to be resistant. He could soak in all this information and not go crazy. He was resistant to the mind viruses. And that's because he had a mental immune system. He didn't have mind aids. And that's where we're at. We are resistant. Now, as far as infected, we're all infected. Just like Scientology, we all have engrams. Religions, we're all sinners. In this case, we're all infected with mind viruses. It's just a matter of, are we masking our minds? Are we spreading them? And then you have the susceptible, who are the non-thinking media literalists who believe anything they see on TV. And the masses are designed, they're intended to be susceptible. Like their education produces susceptible to mind virus people. They want you to have this passive mode of consuming media so you can be infected by their mind viruses at any time. It says these models are generated from a series of different equations and apply to the spread of misinformation propagated from individual to individual. Some become infected, some remain immune. And look at this. This is stuff that I've been saying. I've been saying for a while that we are asymptomatic spreaders. It says asymptomatic vectors spreading information without being adversely affected by it. We are the worst ones. We are the problem. And the disease X was a WHO placeholder name for the coming big one. And when Musk turned Twitter to X, I said at the time that disease X is going to be the mind virus. And nobody has popularized that concept more than Elon Musk. And disease X is going to be the vector, as in Twitter or X. It's going to be the vector for this disease X, for this mind virus infection that is likely going to be one of the main factors to the Civil War or something. And they'll say, we wouldn't have this Civil War if we didn't have X. And the movie Civil War, again, the MAGAs in the movie were all anti-media. And we could add on to this because, again, the director of Civil War was the writer of 28 Days Later about the apes. And the apes were given a rage virus by watching violence on TV. So watching violence on TV turns them into zombies and they destroy the world. Jordan Peele said that the spectacle of George Floyd's death inspired him to make the movie Nope. Well, the video of George Floyd's death caused riots throughout 2020. The movie Nope starts off with this chimp that goes into a rage and kills a bunch of people. And so the connection here with Jordan Peele is the mind virus connection that causes rage and violence. That you can see something on the TV that can cause you to go violent and others as well. That it's basically a mind virus. Not insignificantly, Jordan Peele was a producer in the movie Monkey Man that came out on 3/11, pandemic date. And I watched it, and it's about a a raging revenge story, but it's all about the rage of this individual with the monkey god mask. So again, this reoccurring theme has to do with the ape and rage, and this idea of a rage virus, and that causes you to go ape shit, to basically, I guess the mind virus connection here is that, yeah, again, the mind virus is going to be spread by social media and the public's going to say, we're going to have to lock it all down. And there's been plenty of lead up to this. Again, I'm looking at this article here. Scientific American, misinformation really does spread like a virus. Prominent social media figures with large followings can become super spreaders of election disinformation. So now you have it, super spreaders. And notice, okay, prominent social media figures, what do they call them? Influencers. And I've been saying that influencers And I got this from the 2017 Economist cover, where it said "Sharp Power: The New Shape of Chinese Influence." And I'll bring this up because it will explain all this. Sharp Power. And the Economist is a great source of predictive programming, looking at their covers. So this particular one came out in 2017. Sharp Power: The New Shape of Chinese Influence. So think about influencers. Influence, right? Now replace influence with influenza. And what do you get? Well, the cover art has the Earth covered in spikes, and it's red where China is. So the inference is that China is going to spread. The red's going to spread. What would happen if you covered this whole spike ball red? It would look like a COVID. So the new shape, well, what was it called when they first introduced it? The novel corona, the new corona. So the new shape of Chinese influence is the novel shape of Chinese influenza, the novel Chinese flu. So to connect back to this article here, the influencers, the so-called super spreaders of misinformation, the influencers are spreading mind flu, influenza, influencers. So there's a connection between influence, influenza, mind viruses. It says, in our model, we assume people have a 10% chance of infection after exposure. Debunking information has only a small effect. Yet nobody believes the community notes. Those just don't work. But you have a 10% chance of being infected after an exposure. Was it Nikki Haley who said, every 30 minutes on TikTok makes you 17% more anti-Semitic? She actually said that. Psychological vaccination. This is mind war inoculation. That's what IPR is. And we're seeing these terms being brought up. Scientific American, psychological vaccination. I said that you're not going to be allowed back on the internet after they lock it down because of disease X until after you've been mind vaxxed, until after you've put on a mask over your mind so you don't spread your mind flu. And let me bring this up. Richard Brody, who programmed the first version of Word, put out this book called Virus of the Mind, The New Science of the Meme. And if you look at the cover art of this book, which I highly recommend just to see where we're at today. Spent 52 weeks on the Amazon top 100. Look at the cover art. It's a mind. It's a brain being vaxxed. And the connection between this individual, Brody, and Bill Gates, Microsoft, we're thinking like, okay, Microsoft Word. What is a mind virus? Fundamentally, it's a meme. It could be a word. And we're talking about words as mind viruses that accumulate and aggregate and spread. And then, of course, the vaccination, you got Bill Gates and you have computer viruses, Microsoft. So there's some kind of connection here where they've been planting the seeds for this new model of the world stage is models evolving, so we accept these new conditions. And they needed to condition us to accept the mind virus, the thought crime, in other words. So psychological vaccination, the viral spread analogy for misinformation is fittingly precise because it allows scientists to simulate ways to counter it. These interventions include an approach called psychological inoculation. Fascinating. Where researchers preemptively introduce and then refute falsehoods, so people gain future immunity to misinformation. So that pre-bunking thing doesn't really work because you can tell somebody what to believe and tell them what not to believe, but they're still just believers. And that's why it's important to stop being a believer, to become a knower and think for yourself, to perceive for yourself, and to get information outside of their limited thing where, oh, this is wrong, this is right. How about you should be able to know for yourself? And if you can't get the information to know for yourself, don't be a believer. Just say, I don't know. I need more information. So pre-bunking won't work. They don't want to literally inoculate people against the mind war. They don't want to turn people into auto hoaxers. So they have to be careful appropriating our content, because we do offer here true psychological inoculation. Relatedly, 43 escaped research monkeys still loose in South Carolina. Caretaker failed to shut 2 doors. Locals have been urged to lock their windows and doors and not interact with the monkeys. And one more element to this. Elon Musk, Disease X, Neuralink. And Neuralink has been connected with killing monkeys, doing these tests, messing with their brains. And that's exactly what 28 Days Later was about. 28 Days Later, messing with the monkeys' brains is what caused the rage virus that brought down all mankind. And it looks like life, well, rather psyops, follow art, but we are going to see that. Copaesthetic says, I think they're mirroring you, IPS. Yeah, they're trying to diffuse it. I see many examples of it. And that's why we are staking our claim. We've planted our flag out here in the parallel media. We're outside of their ecosystem. We don't want to breathe their air. We're not trying to curry favor with them. We don't want to be accepted by them. Rather, we are a separate branch of media. You have main and alt, which are all behind the screen, and then there's us. So they can try, but if they introduce too much real skepticism, the whole thing falls apart. Their whole system is based on having news consumers passive receptacles for mis and malinformation. They don't want active consumers of information. And to be clear, mainstream believers are passive. Alternative media consumers are passive. The only active consumption of media is from the skeptic position, which doesn't believe anything without evidence. "777 says crown chakra versus the clown chakra. Lickety Split says corona chakra. Yeah, corona, crown. Of course, this is all implied in a lot of their symbolism. We talk about this stuff consistently. And the corona thing and the consistent symbolism that we've seen of the sun and moon in various movies, it's always been about, I think, the Jungian symbolism of the sun and moon representing the subconscious and the conscious mind. And the moon, the lunar, I think would correlate to the movies, to the dream world. And then the news media would correlate with the sun and the world that's lit by the light of information. And what they have done, the two into one, like 2001 Space Odyssey and the symbol of the monolith, is they have merged the two. We have collectively been dragged onto their world stage movie set. The moon landing, 9/11, the JFK thing, 2020, all these events that the entire world just accepts as real, as a baseline presumption. Like we have certain parameters, like certain conditions in our fictional universe, certain things that we all accept. Those things all put us into the big movie. Do you live in a world where nukes are real? I don't. I don't live in a world with bowl cut shooters or planet-killing asteroids. And this may not sound like a lot, but it puts me in a different frame of mind when psyops are introduced. I'm not a believer, so I don't get these, I don't have like an automatic reaction. I don't automatically assume it to be real because I've been prejudiced or I've been programmed with a cognitive bias to just see it as inevitable. Ted Stryker 2112 brought in 5 blue wrenches. We got Brock Till Payday, Elephant Tusks, McDirty Work, Mr. Cheswick, and Reverse History are all now Blue Wrench Lodge members. Appreciate that very much, Ted. N.A. Litera said the monkeys are looking for their monkey king. Well, okay, so the monkey thing is concerted messaging. You have HBO with Chimp Crazy. You have the 90-foot tall monkey god statue near Houston. You have that game Black Myth where millions of people are playing the monkey god character. The WHO declares monkeypox a global emergency, and Bad Monkey is released on Apple TV all at the same time. And then you have 28 years later in production, you have Planet of the Apes, you have Monkey Man coming out on 3/11. And this is just scratching the surface, that there's this concerted messaging correlating mind viruses with rage. And what seals it all together is the director of Civil War and his connection to 28 Days Later. Leo Pirate says, in Megalopolis, Mayor Cicero has a nightmare of the moon being snatched out of the sky. Didn't decode that scene yet. Well, okay, Mayor Cicero in the movie, is he the one who plays the Chicken Man in Breaking Bad? I think it's the same actor. Yes, yes. So this is the mayor. Now this is actually another connection I hadn't picked up on. So the mayor in Megalopolis has this ominous little statement he makes to the Neo-looking character, Caesar, who's basically Donald Trump. And he says, I'll see you in 3 days, right before the assassination attempt. And then he resurrects. So you got the Christ thing, dies, resurrects in 3 days. But see, it's the mayor who orchestrates it. So now there's this Tom Wolfe novel called A Man in Full that came out in like 89. So this book's been out for a while. But A Man in Full came out on Netflix this year. And it has this character, this real estate magnate who's in court. He's being sued, all kinds of troubles. And his name is Charlie Coker. It's called A Man in Full. And it's definitely based on Trump. Now, the original book likely was not. But it was certainly foreshadowing in the form of predictive programming Trump. So here he is, Charlie Coker, Man in Full, all kinds of interesting Trump connections. I did a breakdown on it. There's quite a lot. Oh, it was published in 98. But still, way before Trump was the Trump that we know. This book was out depicting this Trump-like character. And so Netflix brings him to life. Now, his death is orchestrated by the mayor of Chicago. The mayor of Chicago orchestrates his downfall. He dies, not directly as a result of the mayor, but the machinations were there. Well, the mayor of Chicago, in The Man in Full, is definitely an Obama stand-in. So this is Obama-Trump thing. So the connection there, again, is that the mayor in Megalopolis is behind the assassination attempt. So again, just Obama references. And Obama has been a part of the body of predictive programming foreshadowing the Trump head wound thing for some time. Even his birthday, August 4th. 216th day of the year, 216, is the Phoenix cycle, according to Pythagoras, which says that the soul reincarnates every 216 years. And this ties in to what someone had said about the cube and the whole 666 thing. Because 6 cubed is 216. And again, the 216th day, August 4th, Obama's birthday. Also the birthday of Hakeem Jeffries. So there's another interesting connection. Again, just re-emphasizing the obsession with dates. So Hakeem Jeffries was born on August 4th, 1970. And he served as the House Minority Leader and leader of the Democratic Caucus. But again, just the distinction here, being the first black House Minority Leader, Obama's birthday, obvious bit of repetition there. Tom Muffin said, just joined. I like the last interview. I could relate to the searching through of various groups. LDS, Scientology, Satanism. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, before everything was so conveniently proliferated online, the research took a lot more, I think, boots on the ground. But I wasn't content to just read David Icke's books and believe everything he wrote. I had to kind of see for myself. And so I did make it a point, because I was always searching for the truth anyway. I wasn't trying to debunk these groups. I was looking for the core truths behind them. And having looked into Scientology, it's very enlightening to see the structure, but I started to see the patterns as well. But when it comes to these secret societies, there's a certain framework that's very consistent. And it has to do with the pyramid, the capstone, and then the edifice below. And it's about the few controlling the many and how it's done. And primarily, it's a knowledge disparity. Those below are in darkness, the darkness of subjective belief. Those above have full knowledge. They've been shown the light. They know what's fake and what's not, the programmers versus the programmed. Okay, phones are open if you want to call in. It's 505-510-4226. Tom Muffet says Dianetics is a value of mass knowledge. Well, Dianetics and Scientology are definitely two different things. And I wanted to learn about Dianetics in particular because we're looking at different models of the mind and how everything works. And there are some aspects to it that are intriguing. So the whole engram thing and mind viruses, like I don't specifically believe in that. However, I think it was it's significant that L. Ron Hubbard had his connection to NASA. We're talking about the Jack Parsons, Marjorie Cameron thing, because I think he was a big part in creating this new paradigm. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim, it's Leo Pirate.
Hey, what's up, caller?
Just had a
yes.
Yeah, had a couple of things to say about Megalopolis that is kind of relevant to the discussion. I noticed a lot during the Bread and Circus's wedding scene. The imagery or lights of red and blue is constantly shined on Adam Driver's character, the Trump character. Red and blue, and I think we talked in the last call. The synthesis of both of them is purple. And when I thought about, the greatest psyop of all time of our lives is 9/11, that really was a moment at that time where political parties really didn't matter. Everyone was united around the screen, and everyone was, say what you will about George W. Bush, everyone kind of agreed at that moment, like, we need to get our act together and take this threat seriously. And if such an event occurred during Trump's presidency, I could totally see that happening. Where, and to fit that into the discussion right now with what's happening with Nick Fuentes, I really think that there's going to be a controlled demolition of the far right and the far left. You've talked a little bit more about the far right. Do you think there could be a demolition of the far left?
I think ultimately that could be the whole purpose, this duality, the whole Hegelian dialectic, because, I often talk about the alien invasion, how it all symbolizes the uniting of all mankind, because now national borders don't matter, but they're always called the grays, and black and white, gray. I think they represent the ultimate synthesis of all these dialectics, the one thing that can unite us all. And it could be the point, because as I mentioned earlier, the movie ends with the pledge of allegiance to humanity, like as one. Like, isn't that kind of the whole point of the movie? So you could be right about this, that they have to do something that says we can't have this division, we must unite. And it could be the thing that eventually justifies the total censorship of the internet, because mind viruses are too divisive.
It's funny you bring up the alien thing. Ronald Reagan had issued a speech at the United Nations where he talked about how if only we had an alien threat, we would all be united. It's quite an interesting clip. I could probably post it in the Gilded chat. I have it saved on my computer. And we've talked before about the clear parallels between Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan. Both of them have had assassination attempts on their life. Both of them had the Mormon Tabernacle Choir perform at their inauguration. Both of them are seen as Christian candidates by the most low information fake Christians in Earth's history. There was a Reagan biopic that came out in September. The parallels are absolutely there. Both of them have said, "Make America Great Again." But, the thing is with Trump, right before he ended his presidency, didn't he establish the Space Force?
He did. And establishing the Space Force, interestingly, fits in with this, because, like, they say aliens would unite us. But it's pretty clear that the left and the right have different opinions on the aliens. And the right is against illegal aliens and extraterrestrials, because they're all about Space Force. And they see aliens as demons. Like, in fact, an alien demon attacked Tucker Carlson when he was in bed, and his 4 dogs didn't protect him as it ripped his back open. Did you hear Tucker say that the aliens were demons? And
I saw that on your show.
Well, as you can see, though, it's like, Are they going to unite us, or are the aliens going to be another thing that the left loves and the right hates? But I have that clip from Reagan where, in 1987, he said an alien invasion would unite the people of Earth. So it might, though. It might, because the people who rise up against the aliens might be the enemies that everyone agrees that we need to get rid of. Because for some time I've been thinking that the MAGA, and especially the Q thing, has all been meant to tarnish the nationalism in America and eventually get collective agreement that we must get rid of this. So maybe their antagonism towards aliens could be used as part of the excuse to get rid of them. Like, these are the people the aliens think we need to get rid of to move forward.
It's so funny you bring that up. So I have a friend who knows a lot more about wrestling. I don't know anything about wrestling, but he told me this. The famous clip that's going around, you've probably seen it, of Donald Trump clotheslining Vince McMahon and punching him. Everyone uses that clip. It's from WrestleMania 23, Battle of the Billionaires. I had never seen it, but I've seen that clip. I even used it on my streams, whatever. But I didn't know the full context of that match. A friend pointed me to it, and I watched it. It's only 2.5 minutes long. In that match, it's Umaga versus Lackley or something. I don't know the names. But Trump was betting against Umaga, and Umaga loses, and Trump is fist pumping and celebrating. So in that clip where you've seen of Trump at WWE at WrestleMania 23, where he's all like partying, like, and Vince McMahon is all like, getting clothesline and stuff, it's because Umaga lost, and that means Trump won. So Trump won that Battle of the Billionaires because Umaga was defeated. Very weird. WrestleMania 23 was filmed after the match where Umaga defeated Kamala, who's the wrestler's real last name was Harris. So in the old 2006 match, Umaga defeats Kamala Harris. We saw that play out already. But in the WrestleMania 23 later on, Trump wins by Umaga being defeated. That could certainly be something that happens because I think we both agree the far right MAGA is made to just tar and feather the concept of nationalism to make them look as ridiculous as possible. The other thing I want to say about the alien invasion part, you've mentioned in previous episodes how Alan Moore is a prolific metascripter. Absolutely. Watchmen, the graphic novel, there was a film adaptation for it. I had read the graphic novel. I've seen the film. I like them both, actually. I'm a weirdo in that way. Most people like only one or the other. But the film changed the graphic novel's ending. In the film, they have Dr. Manhattan is like, oh, he's going to attack the world and they all have to unite. In the comic, it's an alternate history world where it's in Robert Nixon's third term, and the Cold War is still going on. And at the end of the comic, you look it up online, they fake an alien invasion in New York City, and that is what unites the world.
What episode is this? Because I've been following. Okay, so
it's a graphic novel.
Okay, in the graphic novel.
It's the end of Watchmen. Yeah, it's just the last. I think there's 12 issues. Just the last issue of Watchmen. It ends with a fake alien invasion in New York City. That is what unites the whole world and ends the Cold War.
Okay, so Alan Moore, interesting. Definitely a metascripter. V for Vendetta is his work, and of course that one had a lot of predictions for 2020. So I didn't know I had to watch it or read it, but lots of fascinating foreshadowing. Space Junk really had its start, I think, in Alan Moore's Watchmen series. But good find there. And as far as you'd mentioned the wrestling thing, and there's quite a lot there with the Umaga thing. But I think you're right about this, because if you look at January 6th, was Trump not just some kind of a Judas goat? Like, we know for a fact that Trump was a part of the PSYOP, that it wasn't a real event, that it was staged. It's not like he doesn't know. He's playing a role. And so I think it's safe to say that, yeah, he did lead them to the slaughter like sheep, that he did defeat MAGA in that sense, that he's actually the leader of the controlled opposition to the authentic nationalists. So I think there might be something to what you just pointed out there.
And I think Hillary Clinton had said many years ago, this is like 2016 when she was going against Trump, she famously said, you could put half of Donald Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. And she was very careful with the words half. I think most people would agree that, Donald Trump supporters. There's some fanatics. There's some real Donald Trump fanatics. But there are some people that are pretty normal that like Donald Trump. I think that's what we're going to see skimmed off the top, the fanatics. Some event's going to totally just get them out. And Trump derangement syndrome is pretty clear on the left. Just all the people who are just totally crazy, they will be skimmed off. Just a theory, though. I don't want to take up the rest of your show. Just some thoughts. Even out what everyone else think about that.
All right, appreciate all that. And hey, Copaesthetic says maybe it's not going to be aliens, but space junk and nukes. That's probably a good point, because they couldn't fake meteors, because that's like a natural phenomenon. But you could have some disaster where a bunch of space junk falls from the sky, and we've already had space junk. We actually have NASA getting sued for it. Musk has space junk falling all over the place. They have created this issue, and for years they've been telling us that if we have too much stuff in space in low Earth orbit, one piece of junk hits another piece of junk, it creates what they call the Kessler syndrome, where we could be locked down on Earth because of too much space junk and it'd rain down on us. And that is something they could simulate very easily. They could simulate, just like in that movie Megalopolis. One of the main themes in this was what? The space junk.
The Russian satellite falling over New York City. And I looked up that clip where they had a nuke warning in New York City where they say, stay indoors, watch media, don't go outside. And I was like, oh, this just sounds like 2020 lockdowns all over again over a mushroom cloud on your screen. Or buildings with CGI space junk falling on them being destroyed. It could be something like that for sure.
Yep. Well, leave the world behind. Anagram for behold the end war live. So when they have us in the next war, whatever it's going to be, if it's Fallout, for example, and I think Fallout is the most likely situation, we will behold it live because we'll be at home watching it on TV and huddling around our screens.
I just had a thought. So when people talk about like faking an alien invasion, they think of like, Martian men, grays walking around the streets. No, I don't think. What they could do is fake the alien weaponry of buildings being destroyed, and like maybe on your screen you can't deny that towers were destroyed or buildings were destroyed on 9/11. That's a stipulation. Everyone will agree on that. Now they projected a movie on top of that with post-production planes, with crisis actors, all that stuff. So something similar could be done with something as fantastical as the weaponry from space. That could probably fit into the space.
Well, you notice so much of the UFO mythology is about how the UFOs show up because we're doing nukes. Like, oh, mankind's gone too far, they got to come stop us. And so from that perspective, let's say they do a nuke and we're locked down because of fallout. Well, if we're at home and we're watching everything through a screen, then that's all we have as far as a source of information. And at that point, they can control us by inserting things, filters, except we're going to believe what we see on the screen. And I think you're right about that. That is the ultimate form of their control is when we're huddled down around the TV with no other sources. But the UFOs following the nuke would fit the pattern of predictive programming.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. So anyway, thanks so much, and talk to you later.
Thanks
Bye.
for the call. All right, so let's see here. Points of interest today. Today is 119 days after Trump was shot. Anti-Trump protesters gathering around Seattle Space Needle. 43 research monkeys on the loose. Again, building on to that concerted messaging about apes and the rage virus, which is right now just sort of gestating. Elon Musk announces a new world order. Atlanta, predictive programming for Trump head wound. Left promoting election denialism. Failed assassination attempt by Iran. And Nick Fuentes will be driven out of suburban Chicago by the Your House, Our Choice activists. We'll continue to follow that story as it emerges. I mean, he's a provocateur. He's an agent and all that stuff. But is he protected? At the end of the day, is he protected from the consequences of some of his rhetoric? And will people on the left go crazy over him? Drive him out? We shall see. I'm sure you've all seen this, but this is not a new clip. But this is alluded to earlier. I want to play this. So this is an astronaut Now, if you're a true believer in fake space, if you're a NASA literalist, if you're a member of the Church of NASAtology and you think that they're literally sending people into space, I don't know how you're going to explain this one away. I'm just looking at it as a video editor. I mean, first of all, there's too many wires. This place is just a hazard. But as a video editor, I don't think this guy looks like he's in the same room. I don't think this astronaut looks like he's in the space you see. This is a green screen situation, but he's kicking around a soccer ball. And as he jumps to the ceiling, you'll see his head will literally go through the ceiling. And I'm going to pause it right there. I'm going to put it on full screen so you can see it as closely as possible. So he's jumping to get the ball. And so the error here is, there we go, some kind of now interestingly, they have two, this is a different camera angle as well. So there's the ball, it bounces off, and then his head, again, it goes into the background. What is happening here? Some kind of a layering issue. Or something, maybe it's because he's moving and the chroma key glitched, but this shouldn't be happening. Again, this is another example of ISS bloopers. Now, again, if you believe in outer space, explain this to me. What is your explanation? Do the laws of physics change in space? Can two objects inhabit the same space at the same time? How is this man's head going into this thing? And while we're at it, we have examples of microphones going into necks, of hands going through microphones. Like, imagine if you're holding a microphone and then it went through your fingers. Like, you're trying to hold the thing and it slips through your fingers. Like that's got to be really tricky living in space. It's like Wonderland, like Alice in Wonderland. It's like normal rules don't apply here. Again, terrible editing, special effects. All right, let's catch up on comments. We have a few more moments here. I want to go through all my bookmarks, make sure I haven't missed anything. So this is an image, someone had brought up Roman Polanski. And of course his wife, Sharon Tate, killed by the satanic witch Susan Atkins at the behest of Charles Manson. And here he is outside of his home, and the media is there watching him scrub the graffiti off his house. They are already here said, your movie star wife has just been murdered in her own home. Is your next move to call the press to cover you scrubbing the graffiti off and looking longingly at the photos? Interesting point there. The quality of PSYOPs have gone up. For all the criticism that we level at the PSYOP entertainment complex, they're not as obvious and bad as they used to be. Again, subscribe at ips.monster if you want to call in, 505-510-4226. And you're also welcome to leave voicemails, and I will play voicemails live. So if you have anything to add and you can't call in live. And then also we have the Discord. I'm just scrolling through my Twitter feed. I see a lot of people walking by Nick Fuentes' house and taking pictures. This is next level. Going to someone's house, and this is the unhinged left. Like, this can't turn out good. Everyone, these people are pretty crazy here. But anyway, they're essentially justifying this. Here's Dexter the dog says, Nick Fuentes of Your Body, My Choice fame has blurred his house on Google Maps. What's he scared of? Now, interestingly, if you go to Google Maps, his is the only blurred house, like on the block, which is kind of a giveaway. Thousands of immigrants protesting Trump. So it's not even really riot season. It's not protesting season, but maybe they won't care. The rage is real. I'm going to play a short clip.
Feel that way together, okay? Let it out. Let it out.
Again, this is someone who's upset about the elections. So I noted that the MAGAs were really kind of tame. Like I was like, there's no way you're getting civil war out of this group. And this is referring to the Halloween Trump rally. I couldn't get anybody to respond to my provocations. But contrast that with these individuals on the left, where no, they're ready to riot. They don't care if it's cold. And that's just one of many. So the derangement is real. All right, here's that clip again, full context, full clip. That is 100% fake. I'm sorry, this is the full clip. If you thought I was just showing you something out of context, there's two camera angles here. This guy is going through the ceiling. Here he is jumping. Head goes through the ceiling. So fake. Does anybody here believe? That's the rage virus. That's an example. Reverse history says the Karen rage virus has arrived. Yeah, that was pretty bad. I see a lot of people dumping their spouses and their families over the vote. And I didn't play too much of this because it wouldn't play, but I'm going to go and play this again. Just a few clips. This is Rachel Maddow, who's pointing out where she says that Trump says he already had the election won in advance. And this is from an appearance on Fox, where he said nobody needs to vote for him. He already has all the votes. You know, for some reason, it's not playing Rachel Maddow, and I'm also not disappointed. I mean, you got the gist of what I was saying here, that the left is dabbling in election denialism. And with the kind of rage that we're seeing on that side, they could January 6th a lot harder. In fact, do you remember that in 2020, they were trying to get into the White House or something? So I think it's going to get more interesting as it goes along. Observing Reality says could be a setup between Groypers and extreme left. Right. That's a good point there. See, Groypers are the followers of Nick Fuentes, America First, and I think it was Leo Pirate who had said that America First, again AF16, January 6th, that America First also has the initials of Arthur Fleck, Joker, and the new Joker movie seemed to depict kind of a sort of like an incel rage against the system type thing. But it did have some intimations of perhaps violence coming from the Groypers, the America First crowd, who no longer have representation. Okay, there was something else I came across as well. It was Tucker Carlson saying that abortions cause hurricanes. Yeah, this is it. I got a couple of more things here. This is Tucker Carlson. He said, "I'm sure I'll be attacked for saying this, but I really believe it." And again, this is Tucker Carlson, who was attacked by a demon that scarred his back and made him bleed. And he believes demons are aliens. So Tucker was abused by an alien. He said, "I really believe this. People are like, oh, well, we've had another hurricane, must be global warming. No, it's probably abortion, actually, just being honest. You can't kill children on purpose. Knowing that you're doing that in exchange for power or freedom, you can't participate in human sacrifice without consequences." So Tucker Carlson claims abortion causes hurricanes. Now, we know this is nonsense. We know he's a CIA provocateur, but why would he say this? Why would he say aliens are demons? And why would he say that inclement weather is caused by God as punishment rather than climate change? Well, because the right wing believes in Noah's Ark. Not all of them, literally, but their paradigm believes in God is more likely to be punishing man for what the liberals are doing with the weather. Just like the left says that Gaia is punishing man because of what the conservatives are doing. And so the blaming of hurricanes on what the far right Tucker considers to be sin, wickedness, would, in his mind, logically, it would follow that God would bring about this weather. So this is part of the left-right schism. Like, right believes aliens are demons. Right believes that God is punishing us with weather because of what the left is doing. It's like a reverse Noah's Ark with the left, where they're like, it's the same exact thing. They've just brought this story back, new iterations, but each side believes that the other side is to blame. Just updated, I guess you could say, a new iteration of Noah's Ark. Cope says, show me where the demon touched you on this doll, Tucker. Yeah, Tucker made the claim to some guy with no bullshit detector that a demon scratched up my back and there's scars. He's like, yo, there's scars right there in my body. They're still bleeding. Like, well, lift up your shirt, Tucker Carlson. Show me where the demon alien scratched you. And I want to compare those scratch marks with the paws of your dogs that you sleep with. Okay, here's the clip where Reagan talks about the aliens unifying us.
In 1987, said something that towed the line between deeply prophetic and deeply weird. And he said it at the United Nations.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Ronald Reagan wishing an alien invasion on Earth because
wishing for a threat. And Leo Pirate mentioned how 9/11 unified us. Well, that was an alien threat, illegal alien threat or outsider threat. But the same theme applies here. The outsider thing unifying us, the outsiders attacking. But isn't it kind of pathological that they would say, I wish something really bad would happen to all mankind so we could all be friends again? Like, that's actually morbid. Lean Dion says Ronald Reagan. Not bad. That's true, actually. Star Wars was Reagan. So Reagan did Star Wars. Trump does Space Force. And then you have the connection with the assassination attempts. Layers and layers of links and connections that show you it's the same script writers, recycled stories. There's a lot of Trump-Reagan connections that you could delve into. Anyway, thanks for joining. I appreciate all the comments. We have 220 people in video, different video platforms from Twitch, DLive, YouTube, and Twitter. We have an additional 50 plus on the audio streams in Odyssey. So we're getting close to 300. And that used to be our average back when we were in our first year before the censorship really kicked in. So I'm glad to see the numbers going up. If you want to get on the newsletter, go to ips.monster. And if you want to be in our Discord live chats, you have to be subscribed so you get those notifications. So again, thanks for all the comments. Appreciate it very much. This is Dinosaurs in Space, Chief Crow and the Flat Earthworms.